Disc 4.
Chapter 14. Frog and the rest of the old goats at the bar stare at Pepper. She is distinctly not of the village, with her shiny black hair and glossy makeup, her tailored suit and stiletto heels. She and Staffe are at a table by the unlit fire in Barfuente's comedor, sharing plates of clams in saffron and sautéed squid with cumin. "Have you got hold of the coroner's report for Raoul yet?" he says softly. "I'm here to check on a denuncia for a series on the demolitions. You might be having one here." "Ah, the English. You know about them?" "I saw you at the Cortijo." "How?" "What about the coroner's report on the body in the plastic?" "You know these English?" "The Harbinsons." He nods sagely. "I need to see a photo of that body in the plastic." "I have my notes on Raoul's death." She delves into her bag, produces an A5 notebook, and shifts her chair to his side of the table. Finding the page, she reads her shorthand to him as quiet as if they were lovers. "The deceased suffered a heart attack which might have caused the crash, but more probably the crash precipitated the heart attack." "Did he have any other injuries, not consistent with the crash?" "Why do you ask that?" Staffe will not tell her about the 2 breaches of the bridge, nor the bloodied rag. Not yet. "I have a suspicious nature, that's all." "He had a cut to the head, and his skull was fractured to the rear. The coroner said it was certainly caused by the crash." "The coroner said, certainly." Pepper refers to her notes. "That precise word." "You'll have spoken to coroners many times, Pepper. In England, certain is a word you have to drag from them." "And here too, usually. And another thing is odd. It's the same coroner for Raoul's death as it is for the corpse in the plastic." "This is beginning to smell quite bad," says Staffe. "There would be blood inside the car if his head injuries were caused by the crash." "There is no mention in the police report." "How happy are you with the investigations into the death of your colleague?" "There's no doubt he was full of drink." She leans forward, whispers, "Are you suggesting that something happened to Raoul before the crash?" "Later, I'll show you the car." As Staffe says this, Quesada, the local Guardia captain, comes in. Staffe lowers his voice. "Raoul was used to driving full of drink, wasn't he?" Salva pours Quesada a long drink of pacharan, without needing to be asked. The old goats suck up to him, and he holds his head high, his Roman nose raised and his greying moustache meticulously waxed. This is a man who squeezes the last drop from his rank, wears his Brigada's emblem with considerable might. Pepper says, "These roads are dangerous. He didn't know them." "Oh, he knew them all right." Pepper says, "I'm not sure this is a road I can go down." "Can you let me have the code to get into Lalente's archive?" Quesada makes his way around the bar, almost to within earshot. From where they sit, Staffe can already smell Quesada's cologne. He recognizes it as 4711. Pepper hands Staffe a slip of paper. "You'll tell me everything you discover." "Of course." "Now tell me about the English living up the mountain." "Is that really why you came?" "Why else would I?" "All I know is that they're called the Harbinsons, and their days here are numbered, but of course I can discover more. They live just below my sister." "You didn't tell me your sister lives here." Quesada waves at Staffe. "Wait here a moment." He goes across to Quesada, shakes his hand, and tells him that there is someone he would like to introduce, a colleague of the murdered journalist. "Murdered?" says Quesada. "I'm sorry. My Spanish could improve." Quesada pulls up a chair, unable to keep his eyes off Pepper. "Pepper and I were talking about the English artist Barrington." Pepper raises her eyebrows, quickly nods. "Did he ever get up to any nonsense, Brigada?" "Barrington?" "You would have been a young man," says Pepper, "but you were stationed in Almagen when he was here, building quite a career, I think." Quesada is flattered to be known by the beautiful young woman, and Staffe leans back, admires her work. On the hoof, she continues, "I am here to do a piece on Barrington. He would have been 90 this September, so the English papers are hot for him. Very hot." She puckers her mouth. "I could do with all the help I can get from someone who knew him. It's the real him that I want to uncover. Something new." "We could start with his funeral," says Staffe. "I don't recall," says Quesada, trying to make a poker face, but his jaw slips a little. "It was a long time ago." Pepper drives fast up through the narrow and winding, steep Almagen streets, and Staffe reaches for his seatbelt. She taps his arm, says, "Not in Spain, we don't wear those things." She laughs. "If you don't like my driving, you can walk." Staffe leaves the seatbelt where it is, watches the village flash by, thinking about Raoul. Pepper puts on the CD player, and Won't Get Fooled Again blasts out. Staffe reaches forward, turns it down, says, "They had to cut Raoul's seatbelt." "What?" "Down the barranco. They had to cut through his seatbelt to get him out." "No way. Raoul never wore a belt." Pepper turns onto the carretera without slowing and speeds along, switchbacks onto the mountain track. "That's what I thought. But I know what I saw." He turns the music back up, says, "Do you have any stone roses? For old time's sake." "Sure." She pulls a CD out of her glove compartment, and he looks at the list of tracks, puts on She Bangs the Drums. "This is my favourite." He was playing this the last time I saw him. Staffe looks at the CD sleeve, and Pepper swerves left and right as she powers up the track, avoiding the worst of the boulders and potholes. By the time they get to the Harbinsons, She Bangs the Drums is still playing. Each side of the Harbinsons' front door, roses struggle into the bleaching sun. Atop the flat roof is a satellite dish the size of their ailing front lawn. Staffe raps the door with 2 heavy police knocks. Within, a dog yaps and sets off another, and when the woman of the house opens the door, the dogs run out. One a Yorkshire Terrier, the other a bulldog. The woman has puffy, cried-out eyes, but her hair is done just so, and she's wearing a silk kaftan. "Sandra Harbinson?" She has a South London twang, somewhere between Bromley and Croydon is Staffe's guess. "Are you from the junta?" "I'm from the village," says Staffe. "Oh, you're English, how lovely." "And this is my friend Pepper. She's a journalist. She's interested in your case." "We can't afford to upset anyone, but come in." Sandra leads them into the lounge, which is small, but with a 42-inch television. In front of it, glued to a frozen picture of the weakest link, is a white-haired man in a striped cotton shirt and polyester trousers. He says, "I had it a minute ago." With 4 of them in the room, there's barely space to move. "Terry, This is an Englishman from the village. He's new. His friend is a journalist. Terry doesn't turn round, just says, "You've not come to knock us down, then?" He says it with no irony, just a soft seam of relief. Sandra sits them at the drop-leaf dining table and begins to tell the story of the denuncia and the demolition order, and as she does, her eyes turn red and her lips tremble, but she doesn't cry. "We're at the point now where there's nothing left to lose. It's all gone on lawyers and architects. Terry does a bit of decorating for the English, but they have no money now, what with the euro and everything." Terry says without turning round, "And the house is still bloody illegal and falling down." He gets frustrated. A car roars by on the track above them, and Pepper says, "Can I look at the barranco?" "The branco?" The ditch that breached." "Oh, you won't paint us in a bad light, will you, my love?" "I promise not to. My article will say that the demolitions are preposterous and need to be stopped." "Well, go on, then." Staffe says, "You hear the cars on this track quite clearly." "Oh, there aren't many. Just people going up to their cortillos." "What about the other day? It would have been Thursday. There was a commotion early in the morning." "That fellow who died?" "Don't you say anything, Sand," says Terry. Sandra whispers, "He says not to say anything. But I didn't see anything, just something on the bridge." "A car?" "You can see it from our front, but my eyes aren't good." "There was another car on the bridge," says Pepper. "I don't know, but it was red, whatever it was. Then Terry called me in." Staffe stands, remembers Gutierrez driving up the track, behind Manolo's red Bultaco. "Is that what made him crash?" says Sandra Harbinson. And Terry suggests that Staffe and Pepper leave. Staffe looks up from the bridge where Raoul perished. Sure enough, he can just see the Harbinsons' cotijo between the chestnut trees. "How are you getting on?" he asks Pepper. She taps a computer notebook and says, "Like I thought. Your friend Quesada was in the Guardia when Barrington was here. Then he moved away for a while." "Where to?" Pepper hands him the notebook, puts a red nail to the downloaded article on her screen. Staffe reads it twice, taking in every detail. "So, he went all the way to Teniente on his watch here in sleepy old Almagen. That's some progress." In 1990, Quesada, Lance Corporal, had acquired information about a shipment of ecstasy pills which was being brought across from Morocco on a pleasure craft into the marina at Agua Dulce. Quesada had been steadfast in refusing to disclose his source, and the court eventually respected his right to protect his information. Shortly after, 3 traffickers were convicted, and Quesada was promoted to sergeant. Thereafter, he continued to be a favoured son within the Guardia Civil. "Guess who wrote the article?" asked Pepper. "Don't tell me. Raúl Gutierrez." Between the lines of his piece, Raúl suggested Quesada must have had a dubious relationship with dealers up in the mountains. "Our friend Quesada got fat on some local misfortunes, and now he's sitting pretty." Staffe hands back the computer, and they walk towards the breach which the workmen had repaired. "I saw a rag down below the bridge, a blood-stained rag, and it disappeared." "But Raúl died inside the car." "Wearing his seatbelt." Staffe stops, closes his eyes, remembers what he heard the day Raúl died. "I am the resurrection," going round and round, then cut dead by the policeman who cut through Raúl's seatbelt. "What track is I Am the Resurrection?" "It's the last song," And she bangs the drums? Second track. There's half an hour between the two. He looks up at the Harbinsons, back down to the bridge. From Edu's to here, that's not going to take more than 10 minutes. Silent for a while, they each think about Raoul and his car and his music, and Staffe contemplates the plight of the English. Earlier, before he met with Pepper, Staffe popped into Casa Sol, the local estate agents. Casa Sol had overseen the sale of Paolo and Marie's land. It had been owned by 4 siblings who now live in Malaga, Andorra and Madrid, and they had held out for the best possible price, and it nearly sold a year earlier, but at the last moment an American had stepped in and made a better offer. "Jackson Roberts," Staffe had said. "How do you know?" "He didn't buy it in the end," said the estate agent. "I knew the first time I saw him he didn't have the money." "Did he seem at all desperate?" Staffe had said. The estate agent had looked at him quite quizzically, said, "Yes, actually. How did you know?" "I didn't," Staffe said. Now he looks at Pepper and wonders how much of his sister's affairs he wants to disclose to a journalist. He points at the bridge where the workmen repaired it. "Just there. See the new concrete?" "It's not big enough for a car to get through." "No, but there was a collision." Staffe strokes the railings where the blue paint is grazed. "It was Raoul's car. That missing paint is on his car. We can go down and I'll show you." "Show me what?" says Pepper, peering into the barranco. Staffe looks down. There is no car in the barranco. When he looks up towards the Harbinsons' house, an immaculately coiffured man with a Roman nose and waxed moustache is looking down on them. Staffe nudges Pepper, who waves up at the man. Quesada waves back, then shuffles off. Staffe says, "We need to find that car, and we need to speak to the coroner." "I can't do that." "And we need a photograph of that dead man in the plastic." "My editor told me to steer clear of Raoul's death." "I know somebody we might be able to persuade. His name is Jesus." Chapter 15. Staffe sifts through Raoul's articles in Lalente's web archive. From his computer in Almeria's Hotel Catedral, he searches a year either side of Quesada's ecstasy bust, but there is no further mention of Quesada, nor does it seem that Raoul took a particular interest in the Alpujarras. Quesada's career had been newsworthy once, and only once. He changes the search within the range of articles written by Raoul Gutierrez from Quesada Almagen to Quesada Barrington. The program only runs by year, so each time he has to go back and forth. But each time, the outcome is 0 results for your search. Before long, he has drawn a complete blank, having come up to present day and gone all the way back to when the digitalization of copy had started. Next, he tries the same with Jackson Roberts, Almagen, and gets nothing. But then he tries Jackson Roberts, Hugo Barrington. He gets 2 results for your search. The first is a routine report of the opening of an art exhibition in San Jose, 30 miles or so down the coast near Gabo. Beneath the headline, San Jose on the international stage, is a précis of the main contributors, a brief biography of the English painter, and a photograph, in which Barrington is a lean figure with waif shoulders but a strong jaw and narrow eyes. His hair is full and long for a man of his age and swept back. Beside him is Jackson Roberts, in a baggy-shouldered suit with a T-shirt underneath. He has what became known at the time as designer stubble, and a ponytail, is strikingly handsome. His arm is around Barrington. The two seem totally at ease. Alongside them is a large-featured, dark-haired woman with her arm around Jackson. At the other end of the foursome, like an awkward bookend, is Francisco Rubio Cano. The photograph is described by Gutierrez thus: the English painter with fellow artist, the American Jackson Roberts, and their friends Rubio Cano and his wife Astrid. Staffe prints off a copy of the photograph. The second result is a report on Barrington's funeral. The funeral took place in his beloved Almagen. Jackson Roberts is again pictured, and again has Rubio at his side, this time without the coffin. They both seem somehow distracted, amongst a crowd of people at the cemetery. Staffe squints at the computer screen, but can see no sign of Edu, or Manolo, or Astrid. He also examines the image of a long trail of people behind the coffin on the track up to the cemetery. In the background, beneath a walnut tree, stands Quesada. Again he prints. Staffe tries Lalente's search facility for Astrid Cano, and comes up empty. He closes down the tabs from all his searches, and the Lalente homepage reverts to a collage of its latest edition, flagging an imminent report of the full police statement on the dead druggie in the plastic. Across the bottom of the screen, the ticker tape tells Staffe that the dead man is a 38-year-old Danish male called Jens Hansen, who has a history of minor drug charges. He has no permanent address in either Denmark or Spain, and the police have tried and failed to find any family to inform. Marie can't remember the last time the baby kicked, but she can feel it's coming. She can also sense Harry growing ever more distant. Today she drove down into the village to meet him from school. Whilst Gracia and her friends swarmed around asking about the baby, Marie waited for Harry to come to her. She watched Ruben and his friends go off without saying a word to him, and she watched him watch them go. She wanted to take him to them and make them like him. Instead, Gracia tried to hold his hand, and he had shrugged her away, come to his mother. She gave him lunch up at El Nido, and then he took his gaming device and walked off, traversing the mountain. All day Paolo has been up in the wood. When they went to release their water from its reserve into the balsa this morning, nothing came. The balsa is empty. Marie knows the baby will bring a new sensor to their life, and she tries to picture what it will be like. She's tired, but lately sleep has been hard to find, with the baby bearing down on her. And last night she went out onto the veranda and looked for the moon. She could have sworn she heard something in the wood. She told Paolo, and he said she was imagining things. Will had bought her a gross of nappies, but Paolo said you can't get rid of them, they don't degrade. She also has a pulverizer for when the baby wants more than her tit, and a pushchair. Paolo built a cot and spent weeks sanding it smooth. This is the extent of her preparations for the baby, and now she gets a panicky feeling that there is a whole host of things she has stupidly overlooked. But she realizes the only thing that is utterly essential is the water. She looks across the mountain, and Harry is nowhere to be seen. She looks down towards the village, feels afraid. She walks past the balsa and into Los Alamos. The stream is on the far side of the wood, and she expects to hear Paolo digging or dragging rocks, but there is no sign of movement. As she becomes aware of the silence, she stops moving, lightens her breathing, takes one careful step after another, almost as if she's spying. Why would she do that? She should call him. But she doesn't. Her eyes adjust to the dim light of the canopy. A faint rustle brushes the poplar leaves, and when it is spent, the wood is dead quiet again. There are no cicadas up here, unlike in the village. As she takes small steps, a low sound emerges. In the heart of the wood, somebody moans. Marie thinks she sees a body hunched on a rock, and she edges closer. Within a dozen smaller paces, she slows even more, seeing that the hunched figure is Paolo. Marie keeps a wide berth, going higher so she can see exactly what is happening, and as she does, she finds herself above him. He has his back to her, which is what she wants, in order to be able to see what he is doing, with whom. But all she can see is that his head is in his hands, his fingers busy in his hair, and now the moaning morphs into an utterance. And another. It sounds like, fuck. Over and again he says, fuck. She edges a couple of paces closer, determined not to be discovered until she knows what he's up to. She holds her breath, sees that he's looking down and to his right. Beyond him, and making its way to his feet, a thin trickle of water glimmers. She takes a final step to be sure. He has dug a channel to divert the stream water to their balsa. Marie puts a hand to her mouth, gasps. At his feet, in the channel, is a skeleton, the skull and shoulders embedded in the bank of the channel. The head seems to be looking at him. With its bone pressed to the earth in that manner, at that angle, the skeleton seems to be sitting up, begging. Marie crouches down, sits on the stump of a felled tree. She presses the palm of one hand to the lump of the baby she carries, the other clasps her mouth, and she wonders how this will affect her. Eventually Paolo stands and covers the skull and shoulders with branches and twigs, then moves off into the light. She goes to the skeleton, removes the branches. The head is curiously small and white as chalk, the shoulders thin and sharp. She thinks she can detect flesh where the pit of the arm ought to be, and she feels sick. The baby kicks, and she gasps. Paolo calls her name, far away. She wants to scream. The baby kicks again, which she thinks must surely be a sign, but her head rules her belly, and she resolves to keep quiet about this. Let him show his hand. As she retraces her steps, something gold flutters in the undergrowth. She bends, picks up a paper band of black and gold, and puts it in the pocket of her elasticated jeans. Marie scuttles across from the top of the wood to the goat shed behind the balsa, takes a milk jug, and works her way down. As she does, she sees Harry sloping across the Sierra, his head down like Christmas didn't show up. She sees Paolo, too. He has the telescope trained on her, and she arranges the muscles of her face into a smile and jiggles the milk jug at him. Paolo waves back, comes to meet her. "How did you get on with your water?" she asks, her heart beating hard. "Where were you?" "Getting some milk. I think the goat is off." "I got the milk this morning." "No wonder I came up dry." "I told you I did it. We had a conversation." "Tell me about the water." "It'll take a day or so." "But you can do it." He steps close and holds her by the hips, feels her swollen tummy against him and whispers, "Trust me, baby." Over his shoulder, a disconsolate Harry stomps onto the terrace. "My battery's died." And in a filthy Alpujarreño accent he shouts, "This whole place is dead! Sons of whores!" Chapter 16. Staffe identifies his quarry, steps into the fat man's path, saying, "Amador Piquet?" "Who the hell are you?" says Piquet, outside the coroner's office down by Almeria Port. Piquet is the same height as Staffe, but with a bulging sack of a belly and a rush of curly brown hair. I saw you down in the plastic where the Dane, Hansen, was murdered. You didn't. And I knew Raul Gutierrez. So? There wasn't much blood in the car. Oh, of course there was. Raul's car hit the other side of the bridge. Explain that. Who do you think you are? Piquet pushes past Staffe. Hansen was no run-of-the-mill drug killing. They say there is antagonism down in the plastic. The farmers aren't getting their water, not since the golf courses. Piquet is out of breath from the short walk to his car. I am a busy man. Strange, then, that they allocate you such disparate bodies to pronounce upon. Why are you assigned to a car crash in Almagen? If you have anything to say, talk to the Comisario. Sanchez? Actually, I want to see the police reports and the autopsy photograph of the Dane. Can that be arranged? Staffe takes out his wallet. Go fuck yourself. I have friends in the press. Believe me, you don't want to see those photographs. And there's no way we would ever let them get out. You wouldn't believe the state that poor bastard was in. It's a miracle we got an ID. But you did, and the farmers still have no water, and up the road they charge 150 for a round of golf. All I can do is assign a cause. It is a pure truth, not like yours. They don't afford me the luxury of speculation. I can't flash my badge and bully people. Staffe steps aside, pocketing the new truth. Piquet knows he is police. How could he know that, when Staffe didn't get as far as showing his warrant card? As Piquet gets into his car, Staffe says, Is it true that the Dane was dead before they buried him? Piquet looks up at Staffe, his mouth open. He starts up the car and says, You have proof. You have the proof. Precisely. Pepa is in the tiny comedor at the back of the Quinta Toro with Angel, the father of Jesus. He plies her with chicken livers in a rich, thick gravy with its hint of star anise. She says, You must be proud of Jesus. He is a bright boy. He will do well, but he could have had this. Angel places her hand on his shiny pate and gestures around him. The way I had it from my father. Perhaps someday, if he does the right thing, it will be his. And therefore his children. Pepa thinks of the way her brother Hilario followed his father into the sea. She looks around, thinks the Quinta Toro might not be quite what it was. There was a time when there'd be 6 staff on the go. Now Angel seemed to be managing with just one woman to help him in the kitchen. There is something you wish Jesus to do, says Angel. You know Manolo is missing. Angel shrugs. He's an independent one. You heard about the journalist who died? Of course. It was in Manolo's village. Angel stops himself dead in his tracks. His eyebrows come to meet each other. He was drunk, they say. He was a friend of mine. My God. Angel stares into nothing. I am sorry. I'm not convinced my friend Raul died the way the police say. But that was up in the mountains. Jesus is in Almeria. Oh, you're his father, Angel. Can't you ask him to help me? Your nephew is missing. Sometimes 2 + 2 is 4. That Dane, Hansen, who died in the plastic, was a druggie. Bad things come to people like that. My Jesus didn't join the force to save lost souls. No good will come of this. He stands. But if Manolo is missing... He looks at his phone, clicks a button and says, I'll tell Jesus. But now I must get on. As Peppa goes, she can still taste the chicken livers. She will be back for more, some other day. In the meantime, she calls the Cuerpo headquarters, not content to wait and see if Angel bothers to trouble his son. Staffe shades his eyes from the high sun and makes his way up the alleyway to Raoul's flat. Looks up at the room which bridges each side of the small street. What a place for a journalist to write about the world, looming above it like that, its people passing beneath. His phone rings, and he sees it is Marie. His heart stops for a moment. "Is it the baby?" he says. "I've seen something," whispers Marie. "Can you come?" "I'm in Almeria." The lion falls silent. "What is it?" he says. Marie whispers so quietly he can almost feel her breath. "Can you come tonight?" "I'll try." "You must. But call first. I'll make sure Paolo isn't here. I can send him to the village." "What's he done?" "Nothing, Will. I don't think it's him." "Tell me what it is." "It's a body, Will." "What?" "I have to go." He stares at the phone, sees she has gone. He tries to call her back, but as he waits for the connection, someone comes out of Raoul's building and he holds the door for them. It is a woman with a pushchair. He fusses over the baby, waves them off and sidles in, stealing up the stairs. On the first-floor landing, he reaches up to the lintel, feels for a key, pulls down the plumb. Staffe lets himself in quickly because someone is coming in through the main door. Their steps echo up the stone stairwell, and he reaches up, replaces the key and holds his breath. Inside, he goes straight to the study and draws the curtains closed, checking as he does that nobody in the street can see. Jesus is at the police compound up the coast on the road out towards Gabo. He looks at the red Alpha and immediately sees the 2 blue stripes on the passenger side that the journalist had mentioned. He has seen the photographs of the bridge up in the mountains, knows that anyone who cared could glean that the car must have hit the bridge on the opposite side and at the wrong end from where it had breached the bridge and plunged into the barranco. "What you up to?" says a mechanic in overalls, ambling towards him with a cigarette stuck in the corner of his mouth. He wipes a spanner on his thigh and looks at the tool, then at Jesus. "I'm going to crush that thing. We stripped it for parts." The wheels are off the Alpha, and Jesus sees they've had the radio and the steering wheel. "I said, what are you up to?" Jesus wonders what he is up to, but the Englishman is his uncle's friend, and now his uncle is missing. Last night, his father had sat in his chair, rocking back and forth, looking at photographs of the family, some with Manolo as a boy. When he was done, Angel had said, "Jesus, you have to take care of this for the family." And he had gone to bed, leaving Jesus to leaf through the album. He had forgotten what his father looked like with hair. Jesus had masses of strong, wavy hair, and he wondered what his toll will be. "I need to look in the car." The window on the driver's side is smashed, and Jesus pokes his head in, jags of glass just inches beneath his throat. There is no splatter of dried blood on the pillar, where Raoul's head would have impacted, and no significant blood projections on the passenger seat, roof, or dashboard, consistent with the amount of blood that soaked Raoul's tattered shirt. "Did you clean this up? Was there more blood than this when it first came to you?" "I wasn't told anybody would be around snooping." I only want to know the car's condition. The mechanic taps the spanner against his leg. Jesus says, "You were told to get rid of this car quick, right?" The mechanic smiles, takes a step closer. Jesus backs away, tips his cap, says, "It's all right. I seen what I came for." He turns his back and walks away. But as he gets into his car, the man with the spanner is onto the phone. Jesus sighs, wonders what he's allowed himself to become involved in. He drives away, watching the mechanic fade in his rearview mirror. Ahead of him, a few hundred yards away, the journalist waits. As he approaches, she raises her sunglasses, perches them in her hair. Her hair is glossy black, and the breeze blows it across her face. She brushes it away, and when she sees it is him, he could swear her eyes light up. It makes him fluttery in the stomach. But what should he tell her? Jesus drops the glove compartment and puts the police report and the photograph of Hansen, the battered Dane, away. "What did you see?" asks Pepper. She rests her bottom on the bonnet of his car and crosses her legs at the ankle. "Nothing new, I'm afraid." "Were they pleased to see you?" "They're only interested in what they can get for a wooden steering wheel." "You didn't stick around for long." He wants to ask if she would come to dinner with him. He wonders what her words might sound like, soft in his ear, further down the line. "The car has been scrapped." "And what about the police report on Raoul?" "What about the report?" She has a dimple on the top of her cheek, like the slash a baker puts in his dough. He shakes his head. "I don't know anything about you." "I am a journalist. You will never be named, not ever." "I should know more." He shifts his weight from one foot to the other. "So, take me for dinner." "You'll come out with me?" "Do you think I should trust a policeman? Especially a shy one?" "I'm not shy." "Then you're deceiving me." She stands up, reaches into the back pocket of her skirt and pushes a piece of paper into his chest, presses her fingers on him as she says, "Call me, and we can talk properly. But bring the report and the photo of the Dane, if you can." When she's gone, he gets the report from the glove compartment, reads it again. Gutierrez's clothes were stained with significant spatterings of blood, yet there was very little blood on the fabric and frame of the car. He knows this because it was on the first report he read, but not the final official report to which the coroner referred in his ultimate declaration. And as for Piquet's declarations, Jesus looked at the report for the other body, the Dane in the plastic. The man had a dislocated jaw, broken nose and a fractured eye socket. 6 of his ribs were cracked. Jesus thinks twice, concerned at the transparency of when the coroner's report claims things happened. On the 15th of August, the day of the fiesta of the Virgin of the Sea, the Dane's body was found and Jesus was called down to the plastic. Most of his colleagues were on annual leave or tied up on fiesta duties. Fortunately, or not, he was close by, having attended a family dinner not a mile from where the Dane died. But it was not until the early hours of the 17th that the body was eventually removed from the plastic and taken to the coroner. Jesus' instructions, even when he arrived at the scene shortly after the ambulance, had been clear. Under no circumstances at all was the body to be interfered with until Comisario Sanchez had come back from Mallorca. Sanchez was holidaying with his family, and he got the first available flight. But that didn't stop the coroner dating his report the 15th of August. Staffe scrutinises the Barrington on Raoul's wall. From the little he has managed to learn, it hails from Barrington's middle period, still figurative but experimenting with colour. Not as much as in his later works. He thinks that this painting might have been painted around 1980, when Raoul would have been a junior reporter. Even then, Barrington was a known artist and his work was collectible. The painting would have cost him many months' salary. Of course, he could have inherited some money, or he could have received it as a gift, were he an acquaintance, or something more. Staffe sits in Raoul's chair, at the desk from where you can see the top of the colonial facade of the Maritime Building. He looks for something he might have missed last time. The desk is Dutch, and the oak is light, the patina beautifully deep and unblemished. It is a desk that has been loved. He pulls out the top drawer, and it slides easily. Comes all the way out, banging into his shins. A ream of blank paper falls to the floor, and Staffe curses. Then something else hits him. The drawer is too short. He runs his hand along the desk the way you might a lover's shoulder in their sleep. He places the top drawer carefully on the floor. Then he pulls the bottom drawer all the way out and places it upon the top drawer. The bottom drawer is 6 inches longer. Staffe stretches, takes a firm hold of the lips of either side of the writing surface, and heaves the top of the desk from its pedestals. He twists, places it on the floor, and feels a tweak in his side, rubs it, looking down on the frame of the desk, seeing what he wants. To the rear of the top drawer is a secret compartment. He slides his hand in and feels around, but there is nothing there. He leans right over and squints into the dark void, sees an unevenness in the surface, and runs his hand along again. His fingers snag, and he takes a grip. He yanks away a cardboard folder which was taped to the back of the front surface of the void. Staffe holds his breath as he opens the folder, removes a series of photographs. One he has seen before. It is the image from the exhibition with Roberts and Barrington, Rubio, and the beautiful dark Astrid. There is another picture of her alone, her eyes heavy and her smile far away. She is wearing a burnous, and there are mountains behind. A sugar-cube village nestled into the fold of a mountain which could almost be the Alpujarras, except the houses are painted the lightest indigo. Clearly, it is North Africa. In another photograph, Rubio and Jackson Roberts stand with a matching pair of Bultaco scrambling bikes. The red petrol tanks faded by the years. In the background, Barrington looks on from beneath a wide-brimmed straw hat. He flicks through, pulling out a photocopy of a marriage certificate between Francisco Cano and Astrid Hesse in Hanover, 1973, and the certification of Manolo Cano, son of Astrid and Francisco. Why would Raoul have gone to such lengths to secrete public documents? There is a noise in the hallway below, or maybe on the stairs. There are more papers, and he flicks through them quickly, not even time for his heart to flutter as he sees cuttings which cover the death of his parents, and the flight of Santi Echevarria. Such a random clutch of articles, with only one thing to bring them together. Quickly and quietly, he returns the drawers to the carcass and lifts the writing surface back onto the pedestals. The outside door to the apartment creaks. Then it is silent. He thinks it must be Pepper. She would be wary entering Raoul's apartment. He could call her name, but what would he gain? A piece of paper lies on the floor. He must have dropped it, and he picks it up, a folded and sealed document with a Germanic lexicon saying, Letzte Wille und Testament von Gustav Hesse. He quickly opens the window and reaches down, feeling for a gap in the flashing where the roof tiles meet the stone ledge of the window. He shoves the document into the gap as firmly as he can and closes the window as the door handle turns. Staffe dashes behind the door, holds his breath, pressing his back to the wall. The door unclicks, Then a whole wall of darkness comes straight at him, fast, his nose cracking, his legs giving way. He sinks to his knees and the door bashes into him again, cracking the side of his head. The heavy door swings mightily into him again and again. His chest seizes. The floor rises to meet him, and the door catches him full on the skull. Before the lights go out completely, the scent of cologne. Chapter 17. Staffe blinks, and his eyelids scratch the lenses of his eyes. When he squeezes his eyes shut, then opens them again, rings of yellow project onto what he thinks must be a blindfold. He smells cologne, says, "Quesada? Quesada, is it you?" There is no reply, and he pushes himself up so he is sitting, and shuffles back, feeling what might be a wall against his shoulders, and then his back. It is cold, and he feels his bare chest with his hand. He hears water running, and then his breath is taken completely away as the water is thrown onto him. "Bastards!" he shouts. Then a slap across his face, and a woman shouting, "Shut up!" She has a husk to her voice, and he thinks it might be familiar. "Pepper?" he says quietly. "Is it you?" The woman laughs, says nothing, but someone takes a hold of his hair. A profound, dull weight presses on his chest. He twists, and they pull him flat to the floor, holding his legs, then an excruciating pain to his heart. He shouts, can't stop himself, and realizes they have something pressed to the thin scar tissue that is taut and fresh over his wound. They press harder, and he bites back on the scream. "You shouldn't be here," says the woman. "What did you find?" says a man. He can't place the voice. They press his scar tissue harder until he can't bear it. He struggles to breathe, thinks he's going to faint, then, loud in his ear, "You let this lie, Gwilly. We know you." And he passes out. He can see. A patch of sky above is brilliantly blue, and he can smell ozone. He is swelteringly hot, and his chest is sticky. He blinks his eyes and forces himself up, sees that he is nude save his boxer shorts. His chest is brown and flaking with dried blood. "Oh, bastards!" he says, flinching, seeing that his wound is weeping. Looking around, he is surrounded by the plastic of a large, dilapidated greenhouse. Beside him, a hole has been dug in the ground, big enough to fit a kneeling man. Staffe senses someone is present, and he looks around. There is an opening in the plastic that gives onto the scrubland sloping down to the dirty beach. Between him and the opening is the African in his burnous. It is blue and yellow, and he is black and blue. One of his eyes is swollen, he is shaking, and his nose is askew. He remembers what the two Moroccans had said about this man, that nothing could hurt him. Staffe stands, staggers across to the man in the burnous, says, "Who was it?" The African shakes his head. Staffe moves closer to the African, but from behind him, the tall Moroccan in the bull's vest shouts, "Stay away from him!" He strides across to Staffe, a machete hanging by his leg. He takes hold of Staffe and pulls him away. The sun glints off a ruby stud in the youth's ear. In his home, made from pallets and corrugated sheets, the bull's youth gives Staffe a pair of torn, purple flannel tracksuit bottoms. Staffe's mind spins to the phone call he had from his sister. Her number would be the last call in his phone. His device, surely in the hands of people who had practically plucked at his heart. "I need a phone. Do you have a phone?" he says to the bull's youth. "I don't have much credit." "Just one call, please." The bull's youth shakes his head. Staffe forces a look of c'est la vie, thanks the bull's youth for the trousers and holds out his hand. The bull's youth takes it, and they shake, his machete still hanging loose, and Staffe sees a glimmer of humanity in this man's eyes, and clinches that moment. Biting his lip against the pain, and with the 3 middle fingers of his free hand, he jabs the bull's youth in the throat, thrusts his knee into the balls, just missing the blade of the machete. Hearing it fall, watching the bull's youth bend double. He puts a foot on his throat, reaches down, puts his hand into the youth's pocket and says, "Sorry. I really am sorry. I will compensate you." He takes the man's wallet and phone and machete, then ties him to the iron stove that has been made from old truck wheels welded together. Staffe says, "Really, I'm sorry, but I have no choice. Really, I don't." Then he thinks of Marie, up in the mountains with another body. Peppa grimaces as she dabs the iodine-soaked lint into Staffe's reopened wound. His bottom lip is white from the continued biting. He gasps, looks as if he might faint again, and she says, "I think it's clean, but we need to get you to the hospital." Staffe looks at the phone he took from the bull's youth. He feels a stab of guilt, then a slow wave of fear. Marie still hasn't responded to his calls and texts. He says to Peppa, "Where were you today?" "Who are you calling?" she says, folding the lint so she has a clean corner, pouring more iodine. "They won't answer." He waits for her to look up. "Like you." "I told you before I was with a young policeman." "And what did he have for you?" "Something is wrong." "What?" "I don't know. Something to do with the police report. He won't show it me, but I am sure he has a copy." "You have good relations with the police?" "It's a thin line. They are cautious of me. You must know that." "I know a journalist can be a friend as well as an enemy. So, is there anything you haven't told me?" "No." Staffe takes her hand. "How would they have known I was at Raoul's?" Peppa pulls her hand away and gives the lint to Staffe. She goes to her wardrobe and picks out the biggest blouse she has, throws it to him. "I don't like what you're implying." "She sounded like you." "Who sounded like me?" Staffe tries to wake Peppa up. Today she looks different. Her hair is tied back. Tight three-quarter jeans, a crisp white T-shirt and no makeup. A sheen on her neck and shoulders from the relentless heat. He thinks that here and now she appears to be too young, too demure to do what he fears she is capable of. He says, "There was a woman." "Ask Jesus where I was." "How long were you with him?" "You're a cocksucker." "I only said there was a woman." "You said she sounded like me. What's that supposed to mean?" "I'll go." He puts on the shirt. Peppa laughs. "What's wrong?" "You look like someone from the fair." She opens the door to her wardrobe, and his image angles back towards him. His purple tracksuit bottoms and Peppa's lemon shirt with the buttons popping. White flip-flops and 2 days stubble, bruising to his eyes. "A proper chorizo." She puts a hand on his forearm. "Let me take you to the hospital." "I have to go back to Almagen." "Why?" "I can't say." "Is that what the phone calls are about?" "They're personal." "I'll take you." "Don't you have work to do?" "I'm doing it. My chief will blame me if anything happens to blacken Raoul's name. I have to stay on top of this." "Cover it up, you mean?" Peppa lets his comment slide, shakes her hair loose and tilts her head, brushing hard without the slightest grimace. "The English papers want the Barrington story. I can tie it into the demolitions too. It will be a nice syndication fee for La Lente. As you know, they have a piece of me." Staffe sits on the bed. He wants to sleep. The prospect of having to get a bus back up to the mountains, jostling with stinking men drinking rough wine and chomping on bocadillos de jamon, doesn't appeal. "I'll pack," says Pepper, tossing a hairbrush onto the bed. "Feel free to use it." She smiles, going into her bathroom. The cliché about enemies being kept close strikes him, so he calls through to the bathroom, "When I get back, I need to be alone for a few hours." "I can amuse myself." She pops her head out. "And in the morning we'll get you to the local medico." He puts his hand to his heart and remembers Jadis Golding. Sometimes you trust people and it cuts you. But if you can't trust anyone, what becomes of the world and us in it? "Fine," he says. "And thank you." She looks at him with wide, sad eyes. Staffe leans back, wonders if things can ever be the same since Jadis Golding unloaded 2 bullets into his body. He closes his eyes, pictures his office in Ledengate, and Pulford and Pennington, Josie too. He's not sure he can remember what she looks like. Her nose, the line of her jaw, the fall of her hair, and the sound of her voice. But you can't take people apart like that. The pictures fade to nothing. Next thing he knows, he jolts in his sleep, and then Pepper is tapping him gently on the shoulder. He says, "Josie?" Feels something in his heart. Pepper says, with a husk in her voice, "Who's Josie?" Staffe rubs his eyes. "Let's go," she says in a low foreign tongue. As Staffe rounds the track below the Los Alamos woods, he loses sight of Marie's cotijo. His new phone vibrates, and he opens it up, sees it is a text from Marie. "Don't go to house, and don't call me. Keep left and low, and come to wood on your left. You will be watched." He wants to call her, ask if she is all right and has anybody been to see her, but he does as he is told, his heart racing. And when he gets into the shade of the wood, he leans against a tree and wipes his sodden brow, lets his eyes adjust to the dark of the canopy. Staffe hears a whistle and tries to locate it. He hears it again and peers at where he thinks it is coming from. Something moves, and he walks slowly, wary of where he treads. Soon, about 50 metres away, he discerns the shape of his sister. He stops dead. She is crouching. He moves higher, trying to glean whether she is on her own or whether she has company. But in his anxiety he takes his eye off the ground, steps on a dead branch, and it cracks, high and loud, and he ducks instinctively, squats in the parched undergrowth. Marie stands, and he holds his breath. She raises an arm, and he waits to see if anyone else shows their hand. She takes a step forward, coming towards him, and he goes to meet her, not caring now if it is a trap. What else can he do? "Are you alone?" he says. "Kind of." "What do you mean?" Marie steps right up to him, puts her head to his chest, which makes him wince, but he swallows the pain as she begins to talk, her voice vibrating against his wound. "I don't know why I thought something good could happen to me. Such an idiot, chasing this bloody stupid dream. That's all it is. A pipe dream." "What's happened?" "I told you there was a body. It's buried in the earth like he was standing up. My God. Marie pulls away. What happened to you, Will? She places a finger to his bruised face. Who did this to you? A stupid fight. She regards him intently, notices the petal of blood on his fresh shirt. What's this? She puts a hand on his heart. A pinch of pain utters like a semitone. Does Paolo know about the body? She nods. He told you about it? Marie shakes her head, her lip trembling. No. I saw him looking at it, but he said nothing to me about it. What's become of us, Will? Is he at the house? She shakes her head again on the verge of tears. I think he might be with Jackson. The police are watching the house. I saw them. Is it Quesada? I don't know. I told you I heard someone out here the other night. What will you do, Will? Show me the body. Marie leads the way and watches as her brother picks at the soil around the bones. He does it for the best part of an hour, with just one finger. And when he is done, he sits opposite the skeleton, just looking at it. The look on his face is familiar to Marie. A look from the past. Another country. Eventually, Staffe takes his stolen phone out of his pocket, comes to her, and she says, You're feeling the rush, aren't you? Rush? You get off on this. That rush of the chase. But it could be us being chased. That's why we have to take control, he says, calling Professor Peralta. He tells him what they've found, that he hasn't told the Guardia Civil, but it's only a matter of time before they know. We must preserve the authenticity of the site. I have friends in the Cuerpo Nacional here in Granada. I'll be there in the morning, and I'll have company. When Staffe hangs up, he is unsure as to whether he has taken a step towards the truth, or, holding Marie's hand as they go slowly in the deepening dusk to the cortijo, not.
End of Disc 4. Disc 5.
Chapter 18. Peppa looks out through the window of what used to be the animal quarters at the bottom of Staffe's house. The room she's staying in is mainly below ground, and its window affords a view of the forelocks of the neighbouring mules as they are loaded up for the trip down to the campo. She hears Staffe ease his front door closed, and wonders where he's going at this hour. But she has her own agenda, and his absence suits her fine. She watches the frayed hems of his jeans fandango between the mules. Manolo has been gone 4 days now, and Staffe checks his friend's front door. Satisfied that nobody is home, and checking around him to make sure he's not seen, he backtracks and clambers up onto the track along the back of Manolo's house, which nestles into a slope, and from here he can see onto the terrace at the back. It is where Manolo dries his peppers, his clothes too. The wall at the back of the house is old, unrendered, and pitted with eroded stone. Staffe sticks his boot into a hole in the blockwork and lifts himself off the ground, reaching for another crack with his hand and then another for his free boot. 2 more moves, and he feels the lip of the flat roof. As he stretches, he feels a zag of pain across his chest. He hauls himself up onto the roof, scratching his stomach and hooking his leg up over the slate edging and onto the mud and shale roof. From here, he can see across the roofs and terraces of his neighbours. He picks out his own, thinks he sees something on his terrace. Could it be Peppa? When he had left, there was no sign of life from her. Staffe steps carefully between the racks of drying peppers on the roof, propped up with rocks to make the best angle to the sun, and tests the hatch that leads into the house. It is closed from inside, but through its gauze he can see it is only held by a flimsy hook into an eye. So he puts his boot to the frame, and the hatch swings inward. He goes in backwards, feeling with his feet for stairs that lead down. There are no windows in this room, and it is cool, dark. The smell of jamon and fried peppers is ingrained, sweet and deep. The house is sparely furnished, with nothing on the walls in the hall and stairwell. Throughout, the tiled floors are highly polished. The place is brilliantly clean, and as Staffe enters the main salon, he is astonished to see a fully loaded bookcase of novels and reference books. A fine shotgun leans against the bookshelf, and Staffe takes it in hand, breaks it, sees it is unloaded, and he snaps it back, weighing it up for balance. When he lines up the sights, something feels wrong. Perhaps it is not as fine a weapon as it appears. He places the stock on the floor again and rests the barrel against the bookcase, then sits in an armchair draped in a brightly coloured woven throw. It is the only chair in a room not furnished for company. He regards the books on Manolo's shelves. Lorca and Cervantes are here, and a giant 2-volume Collins Spanish-English dictionary. Amongst the prints on the walls is a framed certificate from the convent school in Messina. Staffe stands, inspects the certificate, sees that Manolo had passed his obligatoria with distinction, gaining a bachillerato scholarship to the College of the Sacred Heart in Granada. From everything that Staffe knows about Manolo, he never attended Sacred Heart. He considers what he knows for sure about Manolo, how he came to be his friend. Certainly the first meeting was at Manolo's instigation, coming across to him, asking him about his background, and soon discussing the English police he knew from the television, offering him drink after drink, and producing proudly from a pocket his own homemade black pudding. The friendship was truly cemented when Staffe had defended his new friend in that fight in Messina. He looks across to the Bargueño desk, a beautifully carved chest on high, turned legs. He pulls down the wooden leaf to reveal a 3-tiered bank of small drawers. In the left-hand drawer on the bottom row, Staffe removes an elegantly written invitation, embossed in gold leaf, inviting Manolo Cano to the funeral of Gustav Hesse. Gustav Hesse? The name is familiar. It is the same as on the document Staffe had concealed in Raoul's roof. Manolo invited to the funeral, and Raoul hiding a copy of the last will and testament of Gustav Hesse. As soon as Peppa saw Staffe disappear through the hatch into Manolo's house, she descended swiftly from his terrace and left, walking quickly along the edge of the lower barrio. She kept her head down and made her way along the acequia in accordance with the instructions she was given. The spiky reeds along the irrigation channel scratched her legs, and twice she nearly fell, cursing aloud. Where the acequia curves down and away towards the campo, Peppa makes an arc, through the olive grove, back into the village. Sure enough, a large house with a grand portal stands high, fitting the description. It has no number. The doorway is neoclassical and out of place, cracked down its plinth. The entire facade is flaked away. On the top floor, the rusted balcony sports fresh geraniums, the only clue that it may not be derelict. Again, as instructed, Peppa knocks once and waits, then knocks twice and steps back, looking up. A key descends, lowered on baling twine from the ironwork balcony. She lets herself in, smells cured, sweet animal fat, and the ingrained pall of burnt wood and thyme. She climbs the eroded stone stairs. "To the top!" calls Immaculada. "I'm coming," responds Peppa, and by the first landing the mustiness has diminished. The stairwell becomes lighter, and the house floods with the smell of fresh flowers. The walls are hung with woolen rugs and Moorish plates. "Here!" calls Immaculada, and Peppa gets her breath, looks around, following the light into an azotea, where the old woman is rocking in a chair by the opening which looks across the wide valley to the Contraviesa mountains. To the left, Mount Gador reigns like an autocrat. "You're a skinny little thing," says Immaculada. Pepper puts down her bag and instinctively dips into the side pocket for her notebook and pen. "No," says Immaculada, placing her hands slowly to her head, running them deliberately around her face. "Nothing official. Not ever, you hear. This is purely for your understanding." Pepper nods, replaces the tools of her trade. Immaculada is extremely thin, and her hair is white and thick. Her eyes are watery, but they glimmer. She's dressed in black, not the way the village widows dress, but in a pinafore top and linen trousers. "I have made gazpacho. You will take some?" "Yes, please," says Pepper, taken aback. She thought Immaculada would be living up here in some kind of squalor, a woman in mourning, withdrawing into a dark past. Looking out of the azotea, she sees how verdant the campo is, despite the long, scorching summer. When Immaculada returns with the gazpacho, Pepper says, "You have a wonderful view." Immaculada puts the tray down. "Of the future and the past." She hands Pepper a tumbler of the chilled soup and breathes heavily. "Hugo is out there." She says Hugo like Hugo, and points to a V shape in the landscape where the sea comes and goes. "This lot," she stabs a thumb over her shoulder, "they live in the past. I don't shy away from my future. I know what happens beyond this valley. Spain is new, and the world is bigger than it ever was." "Did he show you that?" Immaculada smiles. "He showed me everything." A landscape painting hangs on the wall. The frame is splintered, and the canvas is bleached by the weather. Pepper recognises the period it is from, and knows that, whilst it is not the very best Barrington painted, were it well conserved, it could fetch sufficient to buy an apartment in Gabo or San Jose, and maybe enough left over to keep a maid. "It's a beautiful painting. Were you together then?" "We were always together. And never. He needed space, and I never liked it up there, or that awful Tangier." "Up where?" "In those cotijos. That's a man's world." "Did you go to Tangier?" "I went once." "With your daughter?" Immaculada's eyes glaze over, and she looks up towards Gador. "His later work I'm not so sure about. They say it is magical." "So magical it disappeared?" "I don't understand." "For a foreign market. He said he was painting one for me, but it never materialized. He never lied to me, not once. I knew everything he was up to when he and Rubio went off." "It would be worth a fortune if there was another painting. A last Barrington," Pepper ventures. "For what purpose? I won't be here forever." "What about your daughter?" "She is your one and only." "The first and last, poor thing. I devoted myself entirely." "To your daughter?" Immaculada smiles, with sadness in her glimmering eyes. "When you say no all your life, that is a pure love. And Guadalupe is a pure love. His legacy." Pepper wants to ask about Barrington's other lovers, wants to know how he coped with being so adored. Instead, she says, "You must love Guadalupe very much." "I am not a good mother. In fact, I am something of a bad witch when it comes to family." "Well, your father was mayor." He deserved better than the children he got. Your brother, Edu, didn't get on with Hugo. Edu was too busy trying to fill my father's shoes to give Hugo a chance. He wants to be mayor. He thinks sitting under a tree with an olive net and a bottle will do it. The things we crave can be our greatest curse, and he blamed Hugo for his own failings. Perhaps Edu was being protective. You know what brothers can be like. He was ashamed of me, and I'm sure he still is. Sometimes I think it's because he couldn't find a love of his own he tried to destroy mine. But you came to talk about Hugo. Did he do something terrible? What made you come now? Immaculada plays with a crucifix, which is white gold and like a tiny Modigliani, a wiry Jesus nailed to his cross. She seems to drift away to another place. Hugo didn't believe. The only bad thing he ever did was to question that. I think he might have been a little jealous of my faith. She dabs her eye with the cuff of her pinafore top. So I forgive him. For what? Immaculada purses her lips and sets her jaw, looks straight at Pepper. I stopped believing for a while. A short while, but that's when everything went wrong. I have made my peace. She drinks her gazpacho in small swallows, keeping her mouth to the lip of the terracotta tumbler and slowly tipping it higher and higher. She deliberately sets down the tumbler on an inlaid Moroccan coffee table, wipes her mouth with the back of her index finger, and says, I'm not long for the world. Don't be silly, says Pepper. I only hope I can be forgiven. She hands Pepper a piece of paper, makes the pass with trembling fingers, suddenly looking weak, as if she's running out of fuel. You know, I remember Raoul. I would have spoken to him if I could. There's not many you can trust. I hope you are the same, and I will never see my name in black and white. Pepper says, all I want is to find out how he died. I remember him as a boy. He was the head of the house as a young man when his father abandoned them. Immaculada coughs, and her eyes water. Pass me those. She points to a blister pack of pills. Give me 2 and go. Can I get you some help? God bless you, no. Pepper rinses out the tumbler in the makeshift kitchen and fills it with water. She waits with Immaculada until she has swallowed her tablets down. It takes several attempts, and when she's done, Pepper takes back the tumbler. Before I go, could I ask what first drew you to Hugo? Immaculada's mouth spreads almost into a smile. When he was there, the world wasn't. It was worth it. Worth it? When he was away, I was empty. He was a good father. Guadalupe was his gift. Immaculada looks down into her lap, as if she might have something to be ashamed of. A gift to me, too. You know where to find her now, so you must ask Lupe what a father he was. She beckons Pepper with a wavering finger, signifying it is time to go. Whatever she says, I don't want to know. Pepper kisses Immaculada on the forehead. What we feel, she puts her hand on her breast, chooses us. We can't help it. You stayed here after he died. I bet they didn't make it easy for you. In all my life, I was touched by one man, just him. Not many of them can say that. You could have made a new life. Some things you don't change. But Guadalupe moved away. You could have gone with her. My place is here. It always was. Her eyes close. Peppa waits for the sleep to gain depth, then removes Immaculada's shoes, lays a shawl across her lap, and leaves, reading the note she gave her, knowing exactly where to find Guadalupe. Chapter 19. Professor Peralta's battered yellow Seat Bocanegra is parked up outside the hostel on the Messina road. He calls to Staffe, "Climb in!" The car is airless and stiflingly hot. Staffe asks, "Where's your friend from the Cuerpo?" Peralta prods a thumb over his right shoulder. On the back seat, from within a bundle of blankets, a mop of unruly brown hair emerges, then a tortured face. "He has bad guts and drinks too much, and he has the temerity to blame it on your mountain roads. This is Cortes. Would you believe he is an inspector in our esteemed Cuerpo Nacional, and a fine scholar in his time, now merely a common drunk." "Fuck off, Prof," says Cortes, pulling the blankets back over his head. Peralta spins the wheels, veering off onto the dirt track, kicking up high red dust. After 10 minutes of switchback driving and cursing from beneath the blankets, Staffe points to the wood. Peralta screeches to a halt, jabs Cortes where his head appears to be, and says, "Get your tools out, you drunken cunt. We're here." Cortes gets out, shakes himself down, slicks back his hair, and applies his cap. Amazingly, stood perfectly erect, Cortes now looks as though he was born to fit the uniform. The power of permacrease. He lifts open the boot and pulls out a long silver tool case and a camera bag, which he hands to Staffe, then a shovel, which he hands to Peralta. "Mightier than the pen," he laughs, and they all tramp into the woods, Cortes leading, walking directly towards the site. "You know where it is," says Staffe. "How?" "Where would you plant a body in this wood?" "As deep as you can get and away from the stream." "That is why you and I are entrusted with the lore." He gives Peralta a dirty look. "And other pricks simply fuck about with the truth of the matter." At the grave, Cortes chucks down his cap and his jacket, rolls up his sleeves and takes the spade from Peralta, stabbing away at the ground around the bones until he is close enough to the bone to switch to a trowel, deftly revealing the ribs. He is like an artist at an easel, and is soon brushing away the earth to show 3/4 of the circumference of the bones. "If I do any more, the bastards from the war legacies will have my bollocks. And there's a danger he'll collapse." "He," says Staffe. "It couldn't be a woman." Cortes looks closely at the skeleton. "Do you want it to be a woman?" Staffe considers Cortes' question, says nothing. "It would be easier if we could appraise the pelvic bones. I can't really tell from the brow." He leans even closer. "It's not too pronounced." He taps the small bump at the back of the skull. "But this suggests it is a man, and we have a small fracture here, see?" Staffe steps forward, sees a fine crack in the cranium. "But that looks as if it happened prior to death. A few years. This looks like trabecular bone." "You mean healed?" "I can't be sure, but look at the slope of the shoulders, the depth of the rib cage." He stands, puts his hands on his hips. "It would have to be a big woman." She was tall. Cortes shoots Staffe a look. You know who this is. They want it to be a war crime, but it's not. Now you're doing my job for me. It's too early to say what it is. It's buried vertically, probably kneeling, to look like a ladrone's execution. Be careful, Inspector. Cortes gives Peralta a dirty look. There's no such thing as a ladrones. It's entirely consistent with what is known as a ladrones, says Peralta. Cortes picks up his shovel, starts to fill in the body. What are you doing? Says Staffe. Cortes says, It's not a war crime, so it's beyond my terms of reference. Cortes places his forefinger on a tissue of skin beneath the skeleton's arm. They died a long time ago, but I don't think he's 70 years. When Cortes is done, Staffe asks the question again. How old do you think it is? Cortes looks over Staffe's shoulder. Ask him. Staffe turns to see the slight figure of Comisario Sanchez approaching from the southern fringe of the wood. Alongside him is Pepa. When Staffe catches her eye, she looks quickly away. Lets Sanchez move ahead. Comisario Sanchez regards Peralta and Cortes with suspicion, but when he shakes Staffe by the hand, he puts on a broad smile. In the cool shade of the mountain copse, an aura of cologne surrounds Sanchez. It is 4711, he thinks. What are you doing here? Says Staffe, relaxing the pressure of his grip within the handshake. Sanchez smiles. He maintains his grip. Shouldn't I be asking why you are here? I live here. On borrowed time, so people are telling me. You're a long way from home, Comisario, says Cortes. But I suppose this is a kind of homecoming for you. Sanchez moves away, stands over the buried body, taking in every detail of the head and shoulders. He removes a Cohiba cigar from its case and discards the gold and black paper ring. Without looking up, he says, Cortes, if you're here, this must be a ghost. I'll write my report. And I'll read it. Now cut the shit and tell me what we have here. A ghost, right? Cortes says, We can't be sure. It might be too recent. We'll need to test. But, talking of the past, do they still welcome you back in these parts, Comisario? After you left in such haste? Quesada arrived soon after Sanchez called him, bringing 2 Guardia, who have now cordoned off a 20-metre radius around the body. Watching the Guardia taking over the body, Cortes says to Sanchez, I see you and Quesada have made your peace, but I still don't understand what brings you up here. One of my citizens died in this village last week, and now a body is found. I am just making sure it is coincidence, that everything is as it appears to be. Sanchez takes 2 steps closer to Cortes, lowers his voice. This is a shameful execution from a terrible time for Spain. Unless you have evidence to prove another crime was committed, it will be documented as a ghost. Correct? I will write my report, says Cortes. And I will see it finds its rightful place in our body of evidence. Give my regards to your Comisario. Cortes tramps off, downcast, and Peralta follows, saying to Staffe, Watch yourself up here, the snakes. Staffe keeps his eye on them, sees Cortes toss his camera onto the passenger seat and get into the back of Peralta's Bocanegra. As they drive off, Cortes catches Staffe's eye, throws a scrunched-up ball of paper out of the car, and Staffe immediately makes his way across to where it fell and plants his boot on it, waiting for Sanchez to drive past in his jeep. Sanchez pulls up and Staffe says, "Regardless of the truth we get, Cortes' report will make interesting reading." "Who do you think you are? How could you possibly get to see that report?" And with that, he drives off. Quesada says to Staffe, "Death seems to be following you around." "It's vice versa. And we're policemen, that's how it is." "You are no policeman, not in my country." "You told me you didn't go to Barrington's funeral." "What makes you think I did?" "I saw you in a photograph, watching proceedings." "I was in the vicinity, but I wasn't at the funeral," says Quesada, turning his back, following Sanchez down the mountain. Before the clouds of dust have dispersed, Staffe kneels down, picks up the scrunched ball of paper, and makes his way up to Marie's terrace, where she and Pepper are talking. "What was that?" Pepper asks, as Staffe slumps into a deck chair. "You came here with Sanchez," says Staffe, straightening out the scrunched notes that Cortes had discarded. Pepper shakes her head. "I was on the road, and he offered me a lift. I was coming here anyway." "On your way to a good story, eh? Will Sanchez dictate it for you, like he did to Raoul for Jens Hansen's murder story?" "If I don't write it, somebody else will." "How did you know there was a body up here?" "I didn't. Sanchez asked where your sister's cortijo is. What was I supposed to do, let him come here on his own with his own devices?" Such a good Samaritan all of a sudden. "What did you pick up off the road before?" "Nothing." "Those are his notes, that cuerpo from Granada. Why were you coming up here anyway?" "You know Barrington had an affair with their woman in the village." "Well, the consensus is that there was more than one, but I presume you're talking about Edu's sister." "Immaculada." "She lives like a hermit in a big old house in the middle of the village. She won't speak to anyone." "Well, she spoke to me. She has a daughter, Guadalupe." "With Barrington?" "And the daughter is living in Granada." "How the hell did you get that out of her?" "La lente is an old and trusted organ, feeding these people the truth since before Franco." "We can't be sure the daughter is Barrington's." "Immaculada is not a sentimental woman. She is bruised, and she has the daughter on her conscience. I think she is dying." "What exactly would be on her conscience?" "That she loves the man who shamed her, even though he didn't stand by her. That she loves him more than she loves her own daughter. That she was not a good mother." "And how does telling you make it any better for her?" "I think she was rather fond of Raoul, and she is running out of time. Everyone here thinks she is a harlot and her daughter is a bastard. If she waits much longer, other people will tell her story, and his." "It's all right for her to say her daughter's in Granada. That's hardly a story. Granada is a big place." "I have an address." "No." "What's happened?" says Marie, coming out of the cortijo with olives and almonds and a chunk of sheep's cheese. Pepper takes off her sunglasses. Her dark eyes glisten. "Guilly wants me to do something, but I can't." The three of them eat and make small chat about the view and the end of summer. Pepper compliments Marie on the cheese, and they discuss how to make papas a la pobre, until Paolo's truck comes rattling up the track. "Did Edu ever mention a last Barrington?" says Pepper. Immaculada says he painted it for her, but it never materialized. Paolo stops his truck. He looks as if he might turn around and go straight back down the mountain, but when the two guardia overseeing the body stand up, he thinks twice, gets out and walks slowly towards the house, head bowed. "What's happened?" he asks, looking briefly at Pepper, but avoiding the admonishing looks from Marie and Staffe. "I think you know," says Marie. He looks across to the cordon of crime tape around the wood. "I didn't want to worry you." "Not telling me is enough to make me worry. It was your idea to come and live here, remember? You're supposed to protect me from harm." "Did you discover the body?" asked Pepper. "This is a family matter, if you don't mind," says Marie, trying to be polite. "I should go. I need to get to Granada." "We need to talk," says Staffe, following Pepper down the track as Marie lays into Paolo. At the edge of the first bancale, Staffe says, "You're going to Granada? We can help each other." "I can help you, is what you mean." Pepper looks down the mountain, picks out the track that will take her to the village. "I'll leave your key with Salva. Thanks for putting me up." "Let's go together." "You said we could help each other. I told you about Immaculada's daughter and the last Barrington. So, tell me what Cortez left for you." Staffe pulls out the crumpled note which Cortez threw from the car. He hands it across, and Pepper reads, "This body is most definitely not a ghost from the war." "This brings it home," says Pepper. "Brings it home?" "If Cortez is right, it brings it home that Sanchez is covering something up. You should stay here. Look after your own side of things. You know Sanchez is from Messina. He left the mountains in a hurry, and nobody wants to talk about why." Paolo fires up his truck, and Staffe says, "We should go to Granada together." "I have to pack, but I'm not hanging around. I'll give you an hour, and then I'm going." Staffe watches Pepper go down along the goat's trail that leads straight to the village, and hears Paolo coming down the main track. They look each other in the eye as the truck trundles towards Staffe, and Paolo sounds the horn, doesn't slow. The track is too narrow for Paolo to steer around Staffe, and Paolo hits the brakes, but the wheels seize and the truck slides, lurching and kicking up large stones, and Staffe has to take 2 quick steps back. The truck shudders and stalls, jolting a final time and scraping its bumper down Staffe's thighs. He staggers back, grimacing. "What the fuck?" shouts Paolo. "You really don't want to talk," shouts Staffe. "Why is that?" "Get out of my way!" The two guardia stir into life, are ambling down to see what's going on. "Do you want them involved?" says Staffe, walking around the truck, climbing up into the passenger seat. Paolo lets the truck start rolling, and the engine rattles up. "Why didn't you tell Marie about the body?" "I've given her my reasons." "Now tell me." "Why are you always sticking your nose in?" "I spoke to the people in Casa Sol. They told me Jackson Roberts found the buyer for El Nido." "What if he did?" "That means you knew Jackson before you came out here." The track is heavily bouldered and narrow, with sharp turns and steep dips. Time and again, Paolo mounts the verge to avoid the largest of the rocks, precipitous drops on the passenger side. He does it deftly, and rolls a cigarette as he goes. Staffe can't help but admire his style. Paolo lights his roll-up, talks with it in his mouth. "Like I said to Marie, I was worried the body would spook her. It's only a ghost from the Civil War, so what's to be gained by telling her? What if the body isn't what it seems? Paolo says nothing. They rock and roll down the hill, past Edu's cortijo, where a pig is tethered to a post, ready for his matanza. Staffe twists round to see where Peppa is. Picks her out, 1/2 kilometre behind. How odd, he thinks, that Peppa got to Immaculada, the sister of a man Staffe considered a friend, and that he knew nothing of Barrington's bastard daughter, Edu's bastard niece. He begins to think of Edu as a curator of lies, with his grand past and his idle ways and his weakness for fine wine. When they pull up at the junction of the mountain track and the Messina carretera, Staffe says, "You know more than you're saying, Paolo. I know we'll never be best mates, but we are family. You can trust me if there's something on your mind. I wouldn't ever harm Marie." "Same here." "Tell me how you know Jackson. From before. It's best that it comes from you." Paolo flicks his cigarette out of the window and runs his hands through his hair, blows out his cheeks. "Something strange happened." "Tell me." "You have to promise you won't tell Marie. If she needs to know, you'll tell her. Right?" Paolo looks intently at the stash in his lap as his fingers get busy. "The balsa is low. We need the water, and we're entitled. It's a mystery how we got cut off, and it has to be foul play. It has to. But we need the water, and I had to do something, so I dug a trench from the athakea that runs through the wood. There's enough fall for me to get it into the balsa, and there's no way anybody could see me doing it." It doesn't pay to fool around with the water. "Yesterday, when I went back to finish the trench, it had changed. It had been dug another 20 metres. "How can you be sure?" "I had to take it in a straight line to the balsa. Otherwise there wouldn't have been enough fall. If you look where the trench is now, it's barely above the balsa." Paolo turns, looks at Staffe. He's afraid. Staffe recalls Marie saying she heard something in the night. "Someone dug it to where the body is buried." "I can't say anything. They'd have me denounced for touching that athakea." "So you have to keep quiet." "Damn right. But who the hell would do that?" "And why?" says Staffe. With the barest backward tilt of the head, Quesada summons Staffe across to his table in the Commodore of Bar Fuente, and Staffe walks past the old goats at the bar, each tutting and muttering. Be it the City of London or a mountain village in Andalusia, it doesn't pay to be seen talking to the filth. "Your friend Sanchez has gone back to where he belongs," says Staffe. Quesada smiles at Staffe, puts a cigar to his mouth and sucks in his cheeks. "Gutierrez is a citizen of Almeria. He died up here, and I'm sure the Commissario is just tying all the loose ends." Gutierrez also reported on the Dane's murder in the plastic, and that was Sanchez's case. As for loose ends, that is beginning to sound like a hymn sheet you all read from. Quesada sighs. "I heard today that your sister's husband is a friend of the American. Your family aren't exactly over here for the quiet life." Quesada lowers his voice. "I need you to understand me, Inspector Wagstaff. It would be in your best interests, and those of your family, to purge your fascination with that body. A man drove into a barranco, and tongues are wagging about one of our community being missing. This isn't a good time for loose talk. You know we are waiting on the junta's decision for our academy. It will secure the village's future, should we succeed. And I heard today that our friend the Commissario is from Messina. just like Raoul. The commissario is the commissario. How could I possibly gossip about such a man? Forget gossip. Is there anything official about Astrid Kano and her disappearance? Be careful with your digging, Inspector. Don't worry. I'm leaving for Granada. I might go to the Corte Inglés. Tell me, what is that cologne you wear? I don't. You had it the other day. You should try the Ladrón del Agua, a wonderful hotel. Staffe feels a chill at the base of his skull. Quesada smiles. 4711 is very traditional. We all wear it, some time or other. Part 3. Chapter 20. This evening, Jadis hopes to achieve a greater degree of liberty. He watches from a safe distance as Pulford stands in the courtyard of the Limekiln estate. Above, Jasmine comes out, clutching Milly to her hip. She shouts down to Pulford, "You bastard!" Jasmine is crying, and Jadis can't do anything about it. Yet. If his original crime had been allowed to run its course, he would be free now, with his family. As it is, this is intervention time. He watches Pulford walk away and pulls his hood down an extra inch or so, feels his warm, metallic advantage against his flesh, and follows the off-duty DS onto Columbia Road, going up towards Shoreditch Park. The long hot summer has died its death, and it begins to drizzle again. The sergeant sits down on one of the statues and pulls out a fag. He looks done in, blowing his cheeks and checking his watch. On the far side of the park, Hoxton Way, Jadis sees what the DS is waiting for. The blacked-out Cherokee cruises up to Pulford, and Jadis's heart slows. It means tonight can't be the night. But he sticks around long enough to see that it is Brandon Latimer who the cop is meeting. And he wonders how Belat can sail so close to the law after what happened with the hit-and-run up on the Seven Sisters Road. He fears there is only one answer to that question, even though they grew up in each other's cribs, have eaten from the same pot ever since. A tramp comes up to Jadis, asks him for change, and Jadis quietly tells him to go fuck himself. "Fuck yourself!" shouts the tramp. And the copper and Belat look across, and Jadis has to pull down his hood another notch, walking away as naturally as he can to the cutting that plunges steeply to the Regent's Canal. He rolls as slowly as he dare, trying to change his walk so Belat doesn't clock him. They worked on his roll together. In theory, they're still together. Every month, Belat costs him $2,000 still, for the time he served. Some might say it would suit Belat to have that debt of honour wiped. Jadis walks along the canal, and after 3 bridges he sits on a bench, looks left and right and up behind him. He checks the windows of the trendy wooden-clad apartments opposite. There's nobody watching, so he takes out his spliff. It's fat and ready to go, and he stretches his legs out, thinks ahead to a better day when that bastard sergeant will be behind them, when he and Jasmine are together somewhere else. And Belat? He'll take care of that down the line. He sparks up and draws in, long and holding, like someone is rubbing his temples, whispering it all away. Cyclists come, and walkers go, and all along the towpath the evening plays itself out. He looks for the moon, but it is absent, and he can't believe he smoked the whole damn thing. But he has. What the fuck? He'll walk up Dalston and maybe Vicky Park, get a bus up to Stokey right out of the way tonight. Shirell's up there, and he'll be safe. They go way back. He stands, tries to work out what bridge he's at, whether he's gone under the new North Road yet. He can't have, so he walks on with the canal on his right. But he's right enough, because when he gets to the next bridge, it's the one before the cycle hire caff where the canal takes a turn. The bridge is low, and in the pitch dark he ducks his head, which he finds funny. And his laugh echoes back at him, like someone is calling him, and that makes him laugh some more. "What the fuck's funny?" "Eh?" says Jadis, feeling like someone has punched him below the belly. "Nothing's funny. That's what." They're sitting at the empty table outside the empty caff. Jadis knows them. He looks around. "Nobody to save you this time." The lights are off in the building opposite, which is offices, done up nice. He remembers when it was shit here, oil drums and shopping trolleys. Now there's reeds by the water's edge. The barrel of the gun glints, and they say, "Everyone's day comes around. It's the law." And Jadis feels as if he's been hit below the stomach again, only it's in the stomach this time. He knows the stomach is the worst place, the slowest place. And now the sound. A single shot. There's a shadow on him. He can hear the canal in the reeds, but he knows the canal doesn't flow. There must be a breeze. "Are you sure this is it?" says Staffe, looking up the colonial-style building with its balconied full-length windows, next to the church of Santo Domingo and close by the Campo de Principe. "She has the first floor," says Peppa, looking at the piece of paper Immaculada had given her. "Maybe she sold a couple of Daddy's paintings." "He never publicly acknowledged her as his own." Peppa presses the buzzer and checks her dictaphone is charged. "Don't freak her out. This is a lifestyle piece, pure and simple, and you are supposed to be the English journalist I'm syndicating to. I know. The door clicks open, and they enter a lofty hallway. The door creaks back into its jam and clicks softly shut. A voice curls above, bounces down the curved stone stairwell. "Up here." Fresh crocuses bloom from rounded terracotta roof tiles mounted on the wall. The place smells like a garden. Guadalupe, daughter of Hugo Barrington, stands in the open doorway to her apartment. Behind, her world is brilliantly light and the windows are open. The bustle from the street drifts up, weaves around a jazz guitar which Staffe thinks is Joe Pass. The room is enormous, and two of the walls are densely hung with primitive art and pen-and-ink cartoons from a London paper. "I see you like Crichton," says Staffe, reading one of the cartoons and laughing. "Not my taste, but they are funny." "And sad," says Guadalupe. She's older than Staffe had imagined. In her 40s, he thinks. Her hair is thick and jet black, her eyes the palest green. "A friend of your father's," says Peppa. "You can put that away." Guadalupe nods at the dictaphone. "And sign this." Peppa takes the paper and shakes her head. "I never surrender editorial control." "Surrender? An odd choice of word." Guadalupe looks at Staffe and smiles, saying in English, "Then you can fuck off back where you came." Staffe takes the paper from Peppa, says, "It's only a piece for our style section. I think we can live with it." He hands the paper back to Guadalupe, says, "I like your summers." He goes across to a birchwood armchair by the open window. "It is a summers." Guadalupe smiles, quite proud, appearing to lose herself in a moment. "A gift?" I'm amazed she gave you my address. Pepper says, she is very weak. Staffe says, we're not here to pry into your family, but I would like to know more about the art you have and the furniture. May I? She nods. He sits in the Summers chair, says, furniture tells a story, and art, too. Usually the better the art, the more fascinating is the story. It's enough to make you consider becoming an elitist. Guadalupe laughs, comes towards the window, rests her bottom on the low sill, and stares out towards Campo de Principe. Your mother must be happy with where you've ended up, says Staffe. Something to show them in the village. How would they know? Well, surely you have friends from Almagen who visit. They spurned me. Fuck them! Lupe's eyes darken as if she's seen something cruel. Why has Mother done this now? He says, perhaps she wants an acknowledgement of her relationship with your father. Tacit, but from afar. Is that what I am? Tacit and afar? Lupe laughs. An Englishman abroad, says Staffe. I don't feel remotely English. He comes, falls in love, and stays the rest of his life. And he leaves his legacy. Staffe stands beside Lupe. I love your building. It's of the past and the future too, like Granada. Islam in a Christian world. Do your neighbours have a similar aesthetic? There's only two of us, and we think the same. She has the top floor. He. Can I take some photographs? Says Pepper. Lupe shrugs, and Staffe mooches across to the kitchen area. As he goes, he points out a small seascape line drawing on an exposed brickwork pillar. In the flurry of ink, a boat is almost hidden amongst the waves, 3 people on board. In the background, the lunar dune. Pepper takes its photograph. This is Gabo. My father fishes it. Pepper studies the drawing more closely, then stands back. It's good. It's very good. It takes me back there. She closes her eyes. I could swear I can smell the sea. Staffe recalls the photograph of Barrington and Rubio, Astrid and Jackson Roberts, all together at the exhibition in Gabo. It was a different time, but Immaculada was out of sight. Guadalupe's mother exiled in her own land. Who drew it? Says Staffe. I think you've probably got enough, haven't you? Staffe tokes gently on a mint hookah, feels the vapours wash through his body. It makes him see clearly. He leans back and speculates as to who Guadalupe's neighbour might be. He enjoys the hookah some more and waits, and within an hour or so, on the very perimeter of his restful gaze across the Campo de Principe, a familiar and confident gait clicks, like a camera. The man is wiry and wears a singlet top and hipster jeans, a peaked combat cap and aviators. A man of his age should look ridiculous dressed like this, but Jackson doesn't. Staffe counts out what he owes and walks double time until he is 3 or 4 people behind Jackson. The pedestrian traffic is thick on Calle Molinos, but as Jackson passes slowly through, Staffe eases himself closer, and by the time they pass the hardware shop that Staffe had visited earlier, for the putty, he is close enough to reach out and touch Jackson. The shadow from the church of Santo Domingo stretches to meet them, and Staffe puts his hand in his pocket, begins to work his putty. He has to step down into the road as a posse of nuns works its way in the opposite direction, towards the convent of Our Lady of Los Angeles, no doubt eager to bake that evening's batch of Magdalenas. Jackson's key is in the door to Guadalupe's building. Should he wait? He takes out the putty, watches as the large door opens. Jackson steps inside. The door is closing, and Staffe sets his eyes on the door's lock, reaches out, pressing the putty into the lock. The door closes softly, not clicking. Staffe bides his time. Waiting, he presses an ear to the thick chestnut door. From within he hears steps diminishing. He counts to 10, presses open the door. The hall is empty and he steps in, removing the putty. He can smell the linseed. He puts it in his pocket and decides to take the stairs. The door closes behind him with a click. Staffe turns to double-check. Jackson is standing against the wall beside the door. He rubs the blade of a knife up against the grain of his 3-day stubble. Finings of his brown and grey face hair sprinkle to the floor. The sound scratches the dark air. "Why trespass?" "I'm here to see Guadalupe." "You could ring the bell like a normal person." "Looks like you're doing all right for yourself?" Staffe nods up to the high ceiling of the hallway. "Come on up," says Jackson. "What?" says Staffe, fearing the worst now. "I'm going to kick back, and you're going to join me." He checks his watch. It is 10 minutes since the Englishman went into Robert's building. He looks up at the windows, feeling conspicuous and seeing no sign of life. Why is he such a big lump of a man? Shoulders like hams and feet as big as blades of beef. He feels the full mass of the situation he has got himself into. His father used to tell him that once you start a thing, you finish it. Manolo thinks about the way his father was before life got to him. Now, anybody meeting Rubio would consider him arrogant, obnoxious. Masks. And one of them is mad. Has it ever occurred to you that the world just might be a better place if you minded your own business? Jackson is in a summer's chair, just like Guadalupe's in the apartment below. He prods the tip of his knife into the scallop shape of the flesh of his cheek and takes the first drag on an almighty, fully loaded joint. Like I said before, you have a great place here. If you did your homework properly, you'd know my only dwelling in Spain is in the mountains. Jackson hands the joint to Staffe, stands over him. I'd really like you to finish that fucker. Staffe looks at Jackson's knife, imagines what a veteran from his war might be capable of. As he did gain entry illegally, so he takes a drag, trying not to inhale and looking around the apartment. He sees an open sketch pad by the fireplace. In pen and ink, the face of a beautiful African woman looks out, holding Staffe with her almond eyes. Her hair is wild and the sketch is a study in exoticism. Just a couple of dozen masterly strokes beguiling him. Don't do a Clinton on me, laughs Jackson. Are you and Lupe an item? Staffe notices the top of a passport sticking out of Jackson's shirt pocket. I know lots of Guadalupes. Tell me about you and Barrington. Why should I do that? Laughs Jackson. You broke into my world, so finish that thing. Staffe takes another drag and gets a chemical hit at the back of his throat. He thinks it's probably skunk, definitely doctored. Quite a gang. Barrington and Rubio and Astrid, and you. Jackson seems to tense up. But Manolo's my concern. Staffe feels his mind flit away from him. What kind of hold do you have over Paolo? The dope smooths his edges almost to liquid. He tries to focus, but all the questions he had stored and collated morph. Jackson stands again and places the point of the knife on the arm of Staffe's chair. With the free hand, Jackson undoes the top 2 buttons of Staffe's shirt and looks at the wound, trying its damnedest to heal again. "Don't worry, I won't harm you. Not if you play ball." "And what ball would that be?" "I want you to leave Guadalupe alone. It's a promise I made, and I don't break promises. Ever." "How noble." "You don't know me. You don't know how I feel or what I believe." Staffe nods. He feels gentle. "Did you make a promise to Barrington?" "Promises? I should have learned from my war never to make another promise. Trust can kill a man. The Spanish know that. We know its value and its power. Know not to employ it, or allow ourselves not to be held by it. It's sad." "And love? Is that a casualty of war?" "Oh, no, it teaches you to love." "Who did you love, Jackson?" "I loved one woman too much. And also, maybe not enough. Sometimes I think that when you survive, the price has to be high. So high you think it might have been better to be taken." Staffe says, "I survived." Jackson puts his finger next to Staffe's wound, looks at it closely. "You need to get this seen to." "It's okay, from what I can see of it." "Not everything is what you see. That's something art can teach a man. Tend your family, my friend. Your sister's having a baby. You should take more of an interest in the living." "Does that still have Manolo in it?" Staffe isn't quite sure what he means. His mind feels molten. "Manolo in it?" "You knew the body was in the woods. When you got Paolo to buy the land, you had a hold—" Staffe loses sight of what he wants to say. "You feeling it?" says Jackson. Staffe tries to clench his fists, but they're loose, as if he's just come round from the deepest sleep. "What did you do to me?" Jackson says, "You'll never know Manolo's story, and that's what's best for him and all his family. I really hope you can understand that. Trust me." Staffe's head becomes super light, and his brain feels all liquid now. His eyes are too heavy. The air in his throat washes quickly, and he blinks fast, but sleep rushes at him. He thinks he hears banging and somebody shouting, perhaps, but he simply can't open his eyes. He's lying flat, and his muscles won't respond, and after a while the commotion subsides. All is quiet, and he senses Jackson, close, holding him. He smells of ham fat and wine, and his words are soft, which doesn't sound like Jackson at all. "Truth's all buried, and that's a shame," he says, which is the last thing Staffe hears.
End of Disc 5. Disc 6.
Chapter 21. Somewhere close, the echo of a slap. Staffe forces his tongue from the roof of his mouth. His lips are cracked, and he puts a hand to his chest. Feels lint and plasters where someone has patched him up. The walls are hung with ornately painted plates and framed pictures of swirling dancers and posing tight-breeched gitanos with white blousing shirts and black Apache hair. A jug of water on a circular table has ice floating on the top, not quite melted away, which tells him someone has been here recently. He drinks straight from the jug and goes outside, feeling surprisingly fresh. The shadows are long from a morning sun, and he leans against the frame of the low door in the shade of fat vines. Somebody close is knocking out the heavy-hearted Cuban-heeled rhythm for a soleá, and he realizes the slap is actually a clap. Shoeless children play with the dog-eared ball, and he knows he is in Sacromonte. The cypress tips of the Generalife gardens jut the skyline. Staffe pours the remaining water over his head and slicks back his hair. Next door, a young woman pegs out washing on the terrace, watched by her grandmother. From inside the house, the soleá gathers momentum. "Whose house is this?" he says. The young woman shakes her head. "You go. Go now. I would like to thank them for offering me a bed." "They didn't offer." The booted beat clatters to nothing, like something disappearing on a breeze, and a long-haired gitano appears in the neighbouring doorway, which is set into the soft Sacromonte rock. His eyes are heavy, and he says in the laziest, hoarsest Andalus, "You must fuck off, my friend. I'd hate to have to cut you. Not in front of the children." The grandmother laughs. She says, "But the children could close their eyes, and in any case they have to learn sometime." The thin road from Sacromonte into the city is quiet. Men in sports jackets and overdone cologne take coffee and read the morning La Lente. The fountain in the luminescent patio of the Ladrón del Agua trickles soothingly, and Staffe recognizes a familiar figure at the desk, checking out, it would seem. Peppa sees him as she twists to return her purse to her bag. "Where have you been?" "You don't know," he says. "I left you in that Moroccan café in the Campo de Príncipe." "I went back to Guadalupe's place." "I knew you were up to something." Yes, thinks Staffe, she knew. "And now you are rushing off without telling me." "I'm not rushing off. Quite the opposite, in fact." She reaches for the morning edition of La Lente and pokes her finger at the banner. "A day and a half you've been gone." She takes a step closer, sniffs him, stands back and looks him up and down. "Seems you've had a makeover. You're clean and your eyes aren't heavy." She reaches out to his chest, pulls his open shirt to one side. "And finally you've had your dressing changed. What came over you?" The receptionist reaches out with a folded piece of paper, says, "Senor Wagstaff." He takes the note. Reading it, he says, "I went to see Peralta. He took me in hand." Peppa regards him with suspicion, says, "Looking at you, I'd say there's been a woman involved. Is that who the note is from?" He says, "Let's stay just one more night." Peppa crosses her arms under her breasts, says, "No way! I have to get back and file my copy on the secret life of a tongue-tied daughter of a dead painter." "We'll untie that tongue." "And how will you do that?" "She has a lover. A very interesting lover whom I'm sure she wouldn't want the world to know about. There's a La Lente here in Granada as well as Almeria," says Staffe. "We share national and regional news." "So, you know people at the office here in Granada. You can get into the archive." "I was there yesterday, reading up on Barrington. You know, towards the end his style changed. He went kind of looser. It's his best stuff, they say, but there's nothing in museums and galleries from his last 10 years. It was all snaffled up by the Japanese and Americans. Never to be seen. Locked away in vaults, like the wine that's never drunk." Staffe shows Peppa the photograph of Jackson and Barrington in the little gallery in Gabo. In the background are Rubio and his wife, the beautiful Astrid. "Who is she?" asked Peppa, leaning across. "She's beautiful." "But not around anymore." Peppa takes the photograph, squints. This is the Gabo Gallery. See the bust in the corner. What do you know about Astrid Cano, Pepper? Nothing. Do you know her maiden name? Raoul knew. He thinks Raoul made it his business to find out everything about Astrid Cano, and he wonders how much Pepper knows of what Raoul was up to. Can he trust her? He recalls the documents from Raoul's apartment. I think it is Hesse. He watches Pepper go off to Lalente's Granada offices, and he rereads the note the receptionist had given him. He is to meet Professor Peralta at the university, and is already late. As soon as he is through feeding the spool into the projector, Peralta draws the curtains and sits beside Staffe. Says, You have never seen this? No. How did it come to be in your hands? It was left in the lodge by a tramp. He stank of beer. Said he was given 20 euros to drop it off, and when our porter inquired more of him, he became quite offensive. Shall we? The spool begins to turn, clicking. The sound of it reminds Staffe of younger times with Marie and his parents, those eager moments after the film had come back from being developed, weeks after they had got back from a summer in Cornwall or Brittany. On screen, two figures sit at a dinner table, candle lit and pulling faces to whoever is behind the camera. The figures are Barrington and Rubio. Barrington is wearing a flat-fronted beret à la Phalange, and Rubio is in a turban. Then the light improves, and the camera turns. Carrying lanterns, and naked, Jackson Roberts and Astrid walk slowly towards the camera, laughing. There is no soundtrack, but someone must say something, because Jackson and Astrid stop smiling. They lower their lanterns, and each place a hand on the back of the other's neck. They move slowly into a deep French kiss, and the camera gets closer and closer. They raise their lanterns and blow out the flames, and the screen is black. Then the film runs out. It's a shame there's no sound, says Peralta. A shame we don't know who's holding the camera, says Staffe. And a third shame besides what is happening on film. And what's that? We don't know who put it into your hands, says Peralta. My hands? Oh, yes. Peralta hands Staffe a bubble-wrapped envelope. It reads, For Senor Staffe, care of Professor Peralta, Department of Military History, University of Granada. Let's watch it again. Peralta switches the spools, refeeds, and as he waits, Staffe ruminates. Whoever put the film into his hands would want to somehow damage one of the participants. Certainly Jackson wouldn't want it to get out, and nor would Astrid or Rubio, or Manolo, to see his mother carrying on in such a manner. And whoever arranged for the film to come into his hands knows of his acquaintance with Peralta. The film begins its rerun, and Staffe squints, leans forward. Near the end, just before the screen turns black, he says, There! That's it. What did you see? Asks Peralta. Can you get us a better image of a frame? We have a digital technology department in the screen school. Which frame do you want? The instant before it goes dark. There is a face reflected in the lantern glass. I'm sure of it. The cameraman. Or a woman, says Staffe, but he's pretty sure it is a man. Peppa is holed up in a tiny windowless room in the basement of the Granada offices of Lalente, having called in a favour from David, an editor. She worked with him on the exposure of a cokehead tennis player a couple of years ago. He is 3 years older than her, but is a sub-editor, which is what she should be, if she's ever going to get anywhere. She puts down the phone to the syndications editor at Hannoversche Allgemeine Zeitung, known as the HAZ. Pepper did some work for HAZ during the European Student Games, when a German heptathlete had been drug-tested. They'd paid her €100 for a couple of days' work. But it was all about networking, she told herself. And now that chicken is roosting. She has a 7-day authorization into their Level 3 non-subscriber archive. The Astrid Kano search yields 2 results. One is for the marriage of Astrid Hesse to Francisco Kano, and the other is for an article run 15 years later in which her father, Gustav, had appealed for help in finding his daughter, who he hadn't seen for 5 years. Astrid had reportedly left her Spanish family to pursue a new life, possibly in Africa. The article is illustrated by a picture of Astrid with her mother and father. Rubio is there too, but he stands detached. A large child hugs his mother's leg. He looks up at her like a cherub in a piety. In front of him, sitting cross-legged on the floor and smiling mischievously directly into camera, is a smaller, fine-featured boy with fair hair. The boys are named Manolo and Agustin. Pepper types Gustav Hesse into the search facility and gets hundreds of responses. Gustav was a minor celebrity in Hanover until he sold his publishing company to the Handelsmann Empire in 1976, just a few months after his only child took her Spanish husband. Gustav netted 7 million marks for his company and gradually faded from the pages of HAZ, apart from his plea for Astrid, and a later piece in which he was interviewed as part of a larger feature on Germany's disappeared. In that article, Gustav is pictured with his grandson, Agustin, who had returned from his commune in Tangier for his grandmother's funeral. In the photograph, outside the family home, Gustav looks dead in the eyes. Agustin smiles mischievously again and is wearing a Moorish-looking collarless smock. Pepper squints, leans closer to the screen and notices that Agustin sports a tiny ruby stud in his right nostril. She notes down, Tangier, no stud. Manolo not at grandmother's funeral. She checks the remaining articles, which report the death of Gustav Hesse just 3 months ago. Gustav's funeral was attended by a couple of notable authors, but no immediate family. They mention specifically that his daughter, Astrid, did not attend. Gustav's obituary cited his publishing successes and also his love of Africa. Apparently, he worked with one of his Scandinavian authors in helping build a school in Mauritania. Pepper notes down, Last Will and Testament. She drags the file into her pen drive and gives up, happy with her booty. Pepper pops upstairs to thank David. He says, Tracked down any interesting cokeheads recently? Nobody else is in the office, and he comes towards her, standing too close. I've gone off tennis, she says, taking a step towards him and smiling, jutting out her hip so it brushes the top of his leg. They say it's all about the lines with that game. Getting as close as you can. Without blowing it, he laughs. Can you get us close to some lines? She says. To get us started, he says, picking his jacket from off the back of his chair and placing the flat of his hand on the flesh below Pepper's hip, guiding her out, down the back stairs. Chapter 22. Staffe describes the woman in Jackson's sketch. She has wild hair and almond eyes. She's African, and she is beautiful. The barman shrugs, but Staffe can tell he knows her. He puts a 20 on the bar. In this particular corner of town, €20 gets you all kind of places, and it's sufficient to elicit a name. The barman takes the 20 and nods outside. He whispers, Yolanda. She'll be by. Bar Bonbon is in the Campo de Principe. It is a lingering reminder of what the barrio used to be like. Hippies mixed with gitanos and South American whores. Money passes in furtive exchanges, and you can almost hear broken promises snapping in the air. As the barman suggested, Staffe takes his Tanqueray outside. It comes half and half with tonic over a large handful of ice cubes. He feels better than he has in a long time, and he wonders why Jackson doped him the way he did. And who tended his wounds? The evening paseo is underway. Lovers, young and old, walk arm in arm. Entire families meander into the square, chatting amongst themselves and with each other. You don't get this in Blighty, and Staffe contemplates how he might surrender to the pull of being closer to Marie and Harry, and the new baby too. But that gets him thinking about Sylvie, for the first time in weeks. There is a hole in the heart of him that was made the day his parents were murdered, and Sylvie could make him feel as though the hole wasn't there. But it is. The thought of returning to Ledengate brings him down. He swirls the ice in the Tanqueray, blue as a shallow sea. And then the barman scoots out, gives him 2 hard taps on the shoulder as he shimmies through the outside tables. Staffe locks onto the arc of a beautiful, large-boned African woman in a tight fishtail skirt. She has cheekbones like halved plums and large almond eyes. She slows down and gives him a proper look, as if to say, You think you're man enough. He watches her go, cutting wide, slow figures of 8 with her hips. He thinks what a gift Jackson has to so deftly capture Yolanda. As she steps down onto Calle Molinos, Yolanda gives him a final look, and he stands, follows slowly, thinking that maybe these steps he's taking now can make some kind of sense of what happened to him in London. Maybe a blessing can emerge from the blight. Yolanda shouts up at Jackson's building, "Jacques!" She kicks the door and steps back into the road, shouting, "Jacques!" again, up at the windows. Staffe moves into the doorway of a closed shop. "Cocksucker!" she calls. "Lady boy, son of a whore!" She kicks the door a final time and reaches into her bag. Looking left and right and pushing herself against the door, she leaves it open, quick as theft, and goes inside, her fishtail skirt fanning the air behind her as if covering tracks. Staffe moves quickly, crossing Molinos in between the slowly moving cars. He's slowed up by the paseo, and by the time he gets to the door, Yolanda is gone. But the door is slightly ajar, the lock broken and the jamb of the frame splintered. He waits outside, to give her time to start doing what she is doing. As he waits, his heart beats time and a half. After 5 minutes, he goes in, quickly climbing the stairs past the doorway to Guadalupe's apartment. When he gets to the apartment above, he pushes open the door. He can smell terps. He hears a deep cursing from behind an exposed brick wall. Edging a step further, he holds his breath, to better discern what is being said. "Come here, you cocksucker, damn you!" The voice is deep, and he thinks it could be a man, which isn't what he expected. He takes another step, reaching out and standing on the pads of his toes, and then another step. "Son of a whore!" The voice is muffled. He is 1 step away, and he leans forward, craning his neck to see round the brick wall. The first thing he sees is Yolanda's bottom, swaying from side to side. She's on her knees, showing her stocking tops and straining forward. "Ah," she says, from the hearth. Her shoulders are butting up against the lintel, and her head is in the chimney. She makes a lunge for whatever it is that holds such appeal. A final curse, and another sigh of relief. Yolanda sinks to her knees, twists, and sits cross-legged in the hearth, clutching a roll of something wrapped in a blue bin liner. "Hello," says Staffe. The woman looks at him, her almond eyes showing plenty of white. "You," she says, bemused. "From the square. What the hell are you doing here?" I asked the same question. "This is my friend's place, Jackson Roberts." "Jack?" "And that is his?" Staffe points at the wrapped roll. It is 2 feet long and has the circumference of a rolled-up poster. "Ah, no, this is mine, and you can go fuck yourself. I'm going." "Stay where you are, Yolanda." He can see she is shocked to hear her name in his mouth. "Jacques did this for me." "Did he say to break into his apartment and take it from up his chimney?" "How do I know you're a friend of Jacques?" "He has a cortijo in the Alpujarras." Yolanda weighs Staffe up. "Show me," says Staffe, nodding at the roll. "We should do this the proper way." He shows her his warrant card. "Well, that's not Cuerpo." "This is a cross-border investigation, and I'm working with the Cuerpo Nacional. I should really take you to them." Yolanda unwraps the plastic, pulls out a roll of canvas, unfurls it, and holds it up. It is a thing of great beauty, but not what you would expect. So Staffe carefully examines the signature, bottom right. It seems to be the real thing. "You're going to have to hand that across, Yolanda." "No," she pleads. "If it's yours, it will be returned. I'll give you a receipt." "No!" she shouts, her voice cracking. Staffe goes into his pocket. He has a €100 note and a couple of 50s. "Here you are. It's all I've got." "It's worth more than that." The way she says it, Yolanda clearly has no idea quite how much more. Staffe rolls up the canvas and puts it in the bin bag. "It's all you're getting. I could report you for breaking and entering." What's going on? Staffe and Yolanda both turn around, each clearly afraid. "What the hell are you doing in here?" says Guadalupe. Beside her is Peppa. Yolanda snatches the money from Staffe's hand and rushes out, pushing past Guadalupe and Peppa, who watch her sashay down the stairs. On the first turn, without looking, she gives them the finger. Guadalupe hisses, "Jackson and his damned horse." Staffe picks up the canvas. "It's time you told me exactly who you are," says Guadalupe. Downstairs in Guadalupe's flat, Staffe has a hushed word with Peppa, whilst Lupe calls a locksmith to tend the broken front door. Peppa's pupils are dilated, and her eyes flit rapidly around the room, avoiding him. "What did you find out about Astrid?" "She is loaded. At least her family is loaded." Peppa talks mechanically and slow. "Her father is Gustav Hesse. He sold a publishing firm years ago and got 7 million marks for it. And he has a thing for Africa." "Does Astrid have any siblings?" Peppa pauses, rubs her face. She looks at him briefly, then away at the returning Lupe. "No, it was just her. Her mother is dead." "My mother?" says Lupe, sitting with them in front of the fire. "No," says Staffe. "Just someone we know." "What was going on in Jackson's place?" "You told Jackson we came round the other day, didn't you?" "You lied to me. I needed to know who you really are, and he put me straight. Like I said, he's always been good to me. Do you really want to be tied up in this? In what? Staffe goes to the drawing of the seascape. He saw it the other day, and now he sees the point of it. A study for something greater. I should alert the Cuerpo and let them ask you these questions. What questions? I need to know about Manolo Cano, the shepherd's son from Almagen. It was Agustin Cano who was my friend. Agustin? Says Pepper. He left the village years ago, says Staffe. His grandparents wanted him to go to a German school. But they didn't send Manolo. The boys were very different. Manolo is missing, says Staffe. And Agustin? He doesn't concern me. He leans forward in his chair. Manolo is my friend, Lupe. That's why I'm here. Did Agustin have a stud in his nose? Asked Pepper. A ruby. What? Says Staffe. He was only a teenager when I last saw him, says Guadalupe. But he came back, says Staffe. He was in Almagen a few weeks ago, so I heard. I didn't see him, says Guadalupe, turning away, adjusting the heads of some crocuses in a vase. What about his mother, Astrid? Did you see her? Not in a long time, but you hear things. You hear things? The villagers never understood her. They called her a witch. She will go to Tangier. I guess Rubio wasn't exotic enough for her in the end. She'd go to Africa, says Pepper. I know your father liked to visit Tangiers. What appeal did it hold for him? If you're asking me if he went to Tangiers with Astrid, I'd have to say no. I thought he had something of a reputation, says Pepper. That's easily come by in a place like Almagen. Was Jackson exotic enough for Astrid? Says Staffe. Jackson sees the world in a different light. He has a different energy. And, frankly, that appealed to me too for a while. Guadalupe stands. He's not what you might think. Does he still appeal? I was young when I came to Granada, and I was alone. He was a damn good friend to me. He still is. Now, I really must get on, and I'd appreciate it if you put a stop to these visits. Then tell me, did you see your father towards the end? Lupe says, no, holds out her hand and shakes Staffe's with a disarmingly firm grip. If you want to know about my father, why not talk to my uncle? Edu? But he would never have anything to do with Barrington. It's a matter of pride. Pride? Do you really think so? More like he couldn't make any money out of my father being with my mother. Yet he carried the coffin at your father's funeral. I always thought that might have been for my mother. It was the only thing Edu ever did for her, but at least he did it. Now, are you going to leave the painting? I didn't say it was a painting. I'll have to tell Jackson you've absconded with it. Oh, he'll know where to find me, I'm sure. Chapter 23. The Alqueria Moraima is a restaurant set in a Granadino garden of bougainvillea and cypress trees, and named after the woman who inspired the building of the Alhambra. You can't push me around. Nobody ever managed that, says Pepper, as they wait for the waiter to bring their water and a bottle of Calvente. Manolo is missing, and my family are living on a crime scene, so I have to look under every stone. I've told you everything I know. The waiter brings their drinks, and Pepper orders her food. Staffe gestures that he will have exactly the same, and as they wait, Pepper recalls the story of Moraima to herself, wondering what it would be like to be truly loved. What makes you unhappy, Pepper? She looks at the Alhambra, eventually says, Tell me about your parents, Squilly. He tells the tale, and when he is done, she says, I knew it, mostly. But you didn't know that, so thanks for telling me. How did you know? I have a deep sadness, too. And she tells him the story of Hilario, her brother who was carried home from the sea by her father, laid out dead on a table in the corridor of their fishing house by the harbour, and how her father has to go back into that same sea every day. And they still eat from that very table. She says, We're not so different, you and I. No, we're not so different. But how did you know about my parents? Raúl asked me to track down Santi Estebateria. What? He's been in exile ever since he did what he did. But now ETA has another truce. Madrid could never grant an armistice, though. Just like they can't release the prisoners, and ETA are left with a war they cannot win. All the time, what they fight for gets smaller. Did you find Estebateria? Says Staffe. Once he knew I was looking, he found me. You met him? I was about to. Then Raúl died. My chief called me off everything to do with Raúl. So, why are you here? Says Staffe, thinking back to the first time he met Pepper. I have to make sure they don't tarnish him. His reputation is all he left behind. She takes a moment, has a sip of wine. I wish I'd said more to him. When I said goodbye to my parents the last time, I didn't say any of the things you should say. All I could think of was a party I wanted to get back for. I just hope I've learned to be less selfish. The light from the lantern above catches her eye. It glistens. There's plenty wrong with you, but being selfish isn't a part of it. He laughs, and they clink glasses. That first time we met at Raúl's funeral, that was no chance encounter. You snared me, he says. That's not how I remember it. You had your paw on my tail from the get-go. Pepper laughs, says, In that case, you'll show me the painting when we get back to the hotel. Tell me what you found out about Agustín. And is the painting definitely a Barrington? Like you've never seen. She swirls her glass. Agustín is fine-featured and fair, almost the opposite of Manolo. He left Almagen because his grandparents wanted to school him in Germany. I still don't understand why they didn't choose to take Manolo to Germany. He's the elder. Maybe Agustín was the bright one. Well, Manolo had a scholarship to college, right here in Granada, but never got to go. Agustín is the spit from Rubio. What better way to establish a hold over their son-in-law? To have his son with them, the son he loved most, and the other, he gets to tend the goats. Rubio wouldn't have allowed it, surely, says Staffe. Gustav's company sold for 7 million marks. Perhaps Rubio complied with their wishes for the money. If that's why they ended up staying together, Estranged from their son, no wonder they fell out of love, says Staffe, thinking about the film of Jackson with Astrid, Rubio and Barrington looking on. He looks up, sees the reflection of him and Pepper from above in the lantern. "It's your turn," says Pepper. "Tell me what else you learned today." Jackson and Astrid were lovers. There is a film of the two of them together. My God! You mentioned Augustin had a ruby. I saw a photo of him wearing a Moorish smock. He had a piercing in his nose. Something struck me about it. What, precisely? She shrugs. I had a feeling it was significant. And I've been thinking about that body in your sister's wood. Thinking who it is? Astrid. Staffe nods. We're in deep. You know that. The lights on the Alhambra morph from gold to emerald, then an electric blue. Finally, the whole palace lights up, ruby red, and Pepper wonders if it could be a bad thing, to be stuck in the middle of the biggest story she's ever had, or ever will. Staffe unrolls the Barrington canvas and lays it out on his bed, a cushion at each corner softly resisting its instinct to curl back up. Pepper comes across to the bed, gasps as if she's been touched, wraps her arms around herself, leans right over the painting, then stands back from it. You were right. Isn't it remarkable, he says. It's different from all his others. Yes, it's quite beautiful, and romantic. It's full of love. Through the open window, a fast, hollow flutter of castanets, then a low guttural lament from a tortured human voice. We should go to a peña, says Pepper. Raoul took me, the first time we met. She looks sad, and Staffe can't help feeling a concern for her. He remembers how hard he lived when he was her age, making his way, sailing close to the wind. Pepper says, What do you think happened to Raoul at that bridge? He didn't drive straight into the barranco, that's for sure. I didn't ask what didn't happen to him. Someone stopped him crossing the bridge. I think they were there a while. There was a bloody rag, you say? That's gone, and the car has been crushed. We'll never know. He didn't ever wear a seatbelt. That's not exactly proof, though. I know. But let's remember him tonight. I'll take you to the best place, she says as they stand, side by side, looking at the painting. Somewhere Raoul would have loved. Staffe says, Tomorrow, there's something I'd like you to do, for both of us. Pepper looks at him askance, raises her eyebrows. Rubio is in the hospederia. It will be good if you visited. He won't talk to me. You think he knows where Manolo is? That might be too much to hope for, but he has a notebook he writes in. It would help if we knew what was in it. Pepper's eyes glisten, and a smile forms. For a moment she looks truly happy, like a child in the heart of theft. She says, I'll see you in the lobby in 10 minutes. Why do you need 10 minutes? Staffe gives her what seems to be a look of admonition. It's all right. This afternoon was a lapse. I only use that stuff once in a black moon. High above the road, Staffe notices the place he woke up the other day, after he'd been doctored by Jackson and patched up by God knows who. The dodgy gitano is outside again, strumming a guitar. His grandmother sits beside him, smoking and clapping. Pepper says, This is it? And Staffe hands the driver the fare and gets out, discerning a door into the rock. Above the door, sign says, Cueva Bruja, Witch's Cave. They climb the steep steps cut into the rock, and Staffe watches the taxi's red tails get small and go out. He wonders why the driver didn't turn around, go back to where the fares come from. When he turns around, the gitano gives him the dead eye. Pepa is up ahead, getting them in, and with each step, the buleria comes at him with a stronger pulse, drowning the waifish chorus from the cicadas. Inside, the peña is in a series of cells, each carved from the rock, and at the far end a man plays guitar, bent almost double with his cheek on the fretboard. Beside him, another claps with his eyes shut and his face scrunched. A third dances, hammering out the buleria with his heels and soles, sculpting beautiful shapes with his long arms and scalloped hands. First slow, then fast, a rhythm that comes from beyond the body. At a small bar, just a few feet away from the musicians, a young girl hands him glasses of cacique and asks for 20 euros for the door. The drinks are free, she tells him, and the girl nods at his drink for him to finish it up. As soon as he does, she recharges his glass. The young girl winks, moves away, slipping the 20 down the front of her jeans. Staffe surrenders to the night. The buleria finishes, and a woman joins them, dressed in a flowing black skirt and a white blouse that ruches off the shoulder. She dances a fandango, and then they play a soleá, his favourite. That is the end of the first set, and the cave fills with chatter. Staffe is tallest by a few inches, and palest by long chalk. He wants to ask Pepa if she has any gypsy stock in her, whether she feels what they call duende. Pepa says, "You feel it? I can see." She puts a flat palm above her tummy, beneath her breasts, not on her heart but in the centre. Perhaps that is where the soul is. "Where are the toilets?" "I'll show you." She leads him through the crowd. They spur off to the right, where there's only one door saying Servicios. He pushes the door open. Inside it is dark, and he asks her where the switch is. "Keep going, over there, at the end." He sees a cord hanging from the ceiling beyond another door, and he registers where it is, just before the door swings shut behind him, shutting out all light. He takes 3 steps, his arm extended out and high to grab the cord. He clasps his hand shut, expecting to feel the cord, but it's not there. He flails around with his hand, but he can't feel anything. He turns towards the door he came through and can see its outline from the light beyond. Staffe thinks he'll forget about the P and goes back, feels for the handle, pulls, readying for the flood of light, but the door is jammed. He pulls at the handle of the door again, but the handle comes off in his hand, so he taps on the door and calls, "Pepa!" "There's no need for that." The voice is behind him. It is a man's voice, but it sounds muffled. Staffe pulls at the door again, begins to pound against it, but something knocks his leg from under him and he falls to the ground. His face is on the stone floor. The ground is wet, and he feels a great weight on his throat and chest. "Be still." He thinks the voice might be familiar. "Manolo?" he says. But on the 3rd syllable, as his mouth opens to say the vowel, something cold and sharp is put into his mouth. "Don't move." The voice is whispering now, hot and urgent in his ear, and he can smell oil and garlic and peppers on the man's breath. "Your answers are in the mountains and by the sea. You must think about what they buried. The dead aren't what they seem, but they are your allies. They can't ever be buried, not truly." Staffe wants to speak, but fears the blade of the knife in his mouth. Now lie with your face to the floor. Count 50, and don't bother to look. You can't find us. The metal blade presses against his tongue, but the pressure on his throat and chest seems to abate. A light rhythmic tap on the door, and light floods the room. He doesn't move. The door shuts again, and all is dark. He opens his mouth wide and slowly pulls the blade from his mouth. He sits up, waits, and waits. Eventually the light floods in again. Pepper rushes in, kneels by his side. What happened? Where did you go? I called for you. I went for a smoke. She smells of smoke. He wants to believe her. What's that? She says. He looks down and his heart misses a beat. The knife's handle is hand-turned from chestnut and has the head of a goat carved into it. He has seen one just like it. Are you going to tell me what happened? You know as much as me. Someone here doesn't like me. But he wonders if he might be wrong about that, amongst other things. They weave through the dense crowd to stand at the bar where they were before. The crowd distinctly, and quite deliberately, do not look at him. A mournful soleá begins. Staffe recognizes the words from his night on the tiles with Gutierrez. He says to Pepper in English, I was a stone and lost my centre, and was thrown into the sea, and after a very long time I came to find my centre again. What? She says. It's the song, the Soleá de Sonata. Come on, let's go. As they go, the lament soars and falls like a gull. On the balcony in Pepper's room, looking down on the courtyard of the Ladrón del Agua, she says, That song. Were your parents the centre that you lost? Too much happens in life for one thing to make us who we are. Don't you think we are always the same at our centre? He smiles at her. That's a good thought, but I wasn't always the kind of person I'd want to be. You seem fine to me. Come inside. Pepper goes to her wardrobe and sinks to her haunches, reaching in. I'm not sure I should be doing this. Her voice resounds in the old wood, and she pulls out a buff-coloured file, turns to face Staffe, standing awkwardly, looking down on her. Sometimes you have to trust someone, don't you? It's one of God's cruel jokes. Such a good thing as trust, he made it so dangerous. Pepper removes some papers from the file, tosses them on the bed. That's you, she says. Staffe sits on the edge of the bed and begins to flick through. It takes several minutes for him to absorb the content. How did you get all this? He says. They are all public documents, from here and there. It's easy when you're in the game. Staffe taps one of the papers, a photocopied cutting from a Basque newspaper the day after his parents were murdered. Is this Raoul's handwriting? Pepper nods. He reads the date stamp on its back. This was taken from the archive a week before I even met him, before I went to Almeria with Manolo, before there was a body in the plastic. I didn't even know I would go there, or speak to Jesus and discover Raoul was covering the case. There must be something to have connected you to Raoul, or do you believe in coincidences? There's a reason for everything. Pepper nods, sits beside him. Everything has a motive. Everything we do affects someone else. That's why I couldn't trust you. You can't trust me. Think about it. You knew Raoul before you said you did, and you brought him up to the mountains. You were there when he died. I wasn't, and I didn't know him. He knew you. Look, this is nothing to do with me, nothing whatsoever. I went to Almeria to have my wounds tended, and Manolo took me to see his tío, Jesus' father, and we took a ride out to the sea where the body was. What would you give to catch up with Santi Estebateria? Staffe feels his breath get trapped above his chest. He feels light in the head. Pepper goes to her handbag, pulls out a torn scrap of paper. You've seen Raoul's handwriting. Now look at this. What is it? The paper is torn from a diary. In the space beneath the date after Raoul Gutierrez died, and in his own hand, he was to meet Santi Estebateria, the man who killed Staffe's parents. What is cabeza de toro? A bull's head, says Staffe, remembering he had seen something similar before in Raoul's study. Is a place, says Pepper, in Extremadura. It's the other side of nowhere, but forget it, I've checked. He's gone without trace. Staffe slides down to the cool, hard floor and wraps his arms around his knees. Pepper crouches beside him, pulls him towards her, and she holds him. They've got me, he says. Who are they? He looks at the fragment of Raoul's diary and shakes his head, then looks up at Pepper. In the Peña, they said the dead aren't what they seem. They are our allies. Who knew about your parents? Manolo. Did you mention the name Estebateria to him? He nods again. And Edu? Says Pepper. Just them. And your sister, of course. And her husband. 4 people know something in a place like Almagen. You may as well have taken a quarter page in La Lente. But it came from them. One of them. Chapter 24. The art historian painstakingly clips the canvas to the board, having closed the shutters to the room and finessed the lighting overhead. In this light, from this perspective, the painting takes on an even finer dimension. Pepper can feel the toe of the sea, can comprehend its horrific depths, the scale of its swell engulfing the boat. She is amazed by the light within the painting, dawn and a new day beckoning. There is a sense of deep sorrow and foreboding. Each of the 3 characters is distinct, 2 lovers and an outsider. It is definitely a Barrington, says the historian. The stroke work and the palette. They are identical to the few examples of his late work that I have witnessed. As I said, all of those late pieces are now in private collections in Japan and America. But this is so superior, so very superior. I must know where you discovered it. I cannot say, says Staffe. You must tell me this is a national treasure. Barrington became a Spanish citizen, and some say he has a Spanish daughter. My God, this would keep her in pearls and fur for several lifetimes. We represent the family, says Pepper. Family? We are investigating the provenance of this piece, says Staffe. The historian pleads, Don't you see how special it is? It tells us what we never knew for certain about Barrington. You cannot take it away. As carefully as he can, Staffe unclips the canvas from the easel. He places it flat on the table, ignores the wincing moans of the historian as he rolls it up. When they reach the door, the historian calls out like a spurned lover, "What do you call it?" "Nothing, yet. Would you like to name it?" The historian nods and seems to drift away, as if hooked on a memory. "It must be La Cernata." "My God," says Pepper. A shiver shoots through Staffe, from the nape of his neck to his Achilles heel. "Can't you see? Him, the one standing up, he has no centre." "He has to take his medicine in 15 minutes. That's all the time you have," says Sister Anna. Rubio is in his armchair between his bed and the desk beneath the window. Sister Anna whispers to Pepper, "Watch him. He has the devil in him." She lowers her eyes as she says it. The minute the nun closes the door behind her, Rubio's eyes soften, and he taps 2 cigarettes from the soft packet of ducados, offers one to Pepper, who walks towards him. He watches all the way, lights up, and she bends to catch the fire. She's wearing a polka-dot mini-dress. Her legs are bare. "I don't know you." "We never met, Signor Cano." "I would remember." He has all his own teeth, which is unusual for a man from his world. His hair is golden and quite long, combed back in well-behaved waves. His eyes are blue and his cheekbones are like axe heads. Were it not for the battering his skin had taken, he could pass for 45. She thinks he must have been a magnificently handsome young man. And so would I. "You're a friend of Manolo's, you say?" "That's right, but I've lost track of him." "He should be with his goats." "But I'm more a friend of Tino." "Tino?" "His brother, Agustin. We met in Morocco." "My God, you've seen Agustin." Pepper opens the window, flicks her cigarette out and registers the notebook on the desk. She sits on the edge of the bed, leaning towards Rubio, trailing cigarette smoke from her mouth. He eyes her. She crosses her legs, looks around the room, sees a line of journals on a small bookshelf in the lee of the door. "You want anything while I'm here?" "Is Agustin all right?" She leans across, takes another cigarette from his packet. "I haven't smoked black for years." He smiles, leans back, weaves his fingers together above his lap. "Why are you really here? You don't seem his type." "I met Agustin in Chefchaouen. It's where he got his nose done." She taps her left nostril. "He could always knock 'em dead, my Agustin. But I never saw the point of men having jewelry." "I bet you think I'm a gold digger, don't you, Rubio? Old man Hesse dead, and now Manolo is missing, the grandson and heir." Pepper stands and takes a deep draw on the cigarette. "He told me." She walks the other side of Rubio and perches on the edge of the writing desk beneath the open window, her knees a foot apart. "You didn't love Astrid the way she wanted." She feels behind her for the notebook. Just inches above his eyeline, she takes its firm spine between her fingers. Rubio tries not to stare, but fails himself. "I loved her well enough." "What happened?" Pepper raises her foot, puts it on the arm of his chair. "Have you found her?" "Was she lost?" Pepper raises her other foot and rests it on the other arm of Rubio's chair, and he gasps. Can she be found, Rubio? She flicks her wrist, releases the book through the window and into the late morning. Now he looks her in the eye again. I loved her so much. She calls, Sister! Can you love someone too much? Pepper stands and smooths herself down. The door opens and a new, older sister comes in, sees Pepper looking demure and aghast. They each look at Rubio, unable to resist staring at his erection. He says to Pepper, I loved her too much. The sister is livid, says, Did he touch you? Pepper manages a faint flutter of the eyes like a broken-winged bird. The nun grabs Rubio by the hair on his temple and eases him out of the chair, holding him at arm's length, as if she might catch something off him. And he takes his punishment, like someone grateful for any human contact. She calls, Sister Anna, get a cold bath going. It's Rubio. Then she says to Pepper, Stay here. I will come back and escort you out. The moment they are gone, Pepper rushes to the bookshelf and drops to her knees, pulls off the first volume and flicks through the pages. As she does, her heart grows heavy at what she reads. She replaces the first volume and flicks through the second. The same. And the third, then the fourth, until she hears footsteps. But already she has the message. As they walk down the airy, wide staircase of the Ospederia, with the breeze wafting through the open windows, Pepper confesses to Sister Anna that she and Rubio had smoked. When they get outside, she insists on picking up the cigarette butts. Beneath his room, reaching into the roses, she draws blood from a thorn, but she leaves the cigarette stubs, is intent only on picking up Rubio's notebook. She reaches up her dress and slips the volume into her knickers, allows herself to be led from the garden by the fragrant Sister Anna. The notebook lies open on the desk in Staffe's hotel room. This is what he wrote in his book in his cortijo. I saw it, says Staffe. Down the page's centre, with wide margins left and right, and in the neatest swirling fountain hand, are 2 7-line stanzas, and the pattern repeats across each page in the book, and in each of all the many notebooks on Rubio's bookcase in the Ospederia. He loved her, that's for sure, says Pepper. He still does, says Staffe. Does that mean she's not dead? If she is, he can't have killed her, says Pepper. Staffe reads from the book aloud. As the mountain skies are blue, so are your eyes. And the snow in spring, still, your smile shines. And the autumn of the cherry sheds its blossoms. So my wretched heart bleeds. This isn't love, she says. It's a penance. And it's wretched. Wretched? His heart. I couldn't read it properly when I found the poem in his cortijo. His handwriting has improved. Maybe practice has made him perfect. He closes the book and takes a step back, looks at her, smiling. He's only flesh and blood. A rush of blood. Did he know who you were? I said I knew Agustin. I'm pretty sure Agustin is his favourite. Pepper loses herself in a moment. Is something wrong? I don't think money is important to Rubio. It's paying for him to stay in that grand old place. That's not what I mean. I don't think he'd do anything for money. I think he'd rather be poor and back with his old life. I can't work out why he's in the Ospederia. Because the world has to believe he's mad. She nods. You're right. He's as horny as the bull walking down the hill, but mad? I don't think so. Cortez loosens his tie. Dirt is ingrained on the inside of his collar. He has a red mottle to his eyes, and recent drink hums off him. He's at a desk, surrounded by a bank of screens and flashy-looking hardware. There isn't a piece of paper in sight. His office is as kempt as he is dishevelled. "I thought you'd give up the ghost," he says. "But it's not a ghost, is it?" "And you know what it is, I suppose." Staffe places the newspaper cutting of Astrid down in front of Cortez, and for a glimmer, life shines brilliantly in Cortez's eyes, then quickly burns itself out. "I told you, I don't think it's a woman. She is tall and large-boned. German." Cortez picks up the photograph and lifts the lid on a scanner, plonks it face down on the glass. He taps at his keyboard, and an electric blue light glows. Cortez taps some more, says, "A magic piece of kit. Takes all the heartache away, all the reasons to be glad you're alive. I hate the fucking thing." He lights a cigarette. There is a no smoking sign on the wall behind him. The cigarette wiggles as he talks. "I pick out 3 trig points and input just one cell whose dimension I can identify." With a dirty fingernail, he taps the digitized image on the screen, covered in hundreds of faint grid lines. "These tiles are 30 centimetres. He taps again, and a lifelike image of Astrid appears, alone, with the vital statistics written beneath her, detailing her age band, her precise height, and a probable weight. A list of options regarding her likeliest provenance, based on her face, limbs, shoulders, and colouring. Cortez looks at the original and reads the date at the top of the newspaper. Inputs the date, and the data returns. "Northern European. She'd be 60 if she were alive now. When this was taken, she was 1.70 meters and 60 kilos. "Could she be the body in the forest?" says Staffe. "You were there. I had no time to properly appraise, and I only had the rib cage and shoulders to go on. But everything I know tells me no." "But if you had a sample of that skin from under the skeleton's arm, and I could get some hair from a brush or from her clothes in the house in Almachen, you could run a DNA test. That would be proof." "You learn fast, Guiri. But I can't work on this case." "You could run a DNA test for me." Cortez shakes his head. "My edicts come from on high. You'll have to be satisfied with speculation." "Well, you can't let them write the wrong history. Isn't that what they did all those years?" "I need authorization to run any test. Everything is logged. So it becomes impossible for me to help you, Guiri." "You'd let Comisario Sanchez impede you." Cortez taps at his keyboard again and turns the screen towards Staffe. "This I can process." The image of the lantern is highly pixelated. Staffe says, "Peralta sent this to you? Can you make it bigger?" "This is optimal. Bigger, and you see less." Staffe leans in. "Sanchez?" "An ambitious police officer in a room with a famous artist and your American. The mad shepherd and your missing woman. What a pretty picture." He laughs. Manolo is in a cave. He is cross-legged on a dirt floor, blinking up into bright lights. "Now," says the voice behind a video camera, mounted on a rickety tripod. Manolo appears as if he might have been tortured. His voice cracks as he says, "You'll have to find me, Willie. For the truth, you must come home." The metre of what he says is rigid, like an infant scholar reading from a book that is too difficult. "Seek your past, and you will find me." The man behind the camera leans forward and hands a newspaper to Manolo, who holds it up. The paper is from 2 decades ago, and more. It is the front page of La Lente. Alongside each other are portraits of the parents of D.I. Will Wagstaff, Ledengate CID. The lights die, and from the dark a voice says, "He'll come."
End of Disc 6.